Greetings and salutations. Hello and welcome to the Megacast by Actual Tech Media. Today's topic is understanding your cloud-native data protection and disaster recovery options. Thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be another amazing Megacast. On this event, you'll hear from leading innovators in the disaster recovery and data protection space, specifically our experts from Rubrik, Pure Storage, NetApp, Druva, Unitrends, Veeam, Nutanix, and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. If you haven't been on a Megacast before, you should know that we at Actual Tech Media created the Megacast and EcoCast event series to help educate IT professionals such as yourselves about the latest and greatest in enterprise technology to help you do it quickly and efficiently from the comfort of your home or office, to help you get all your questions answered and to help you win some valuable prizes. We at Actual Tech Media are all former IT professionals ourselves, and we know how tough it can be out there in the world of enterprise IT, and we want to help. We encourage your questions in our live Q&A sessions that we'll be having here with each of our experts, and we even have a best question prize to help encourage that. I'll talk more about that in just a moment, but first, there's a few things that you should know about the Megacast. We do have a mega lineup of prizes, as I like to say. I'll talk more about that here in just a moment, as well as the eligibility requirements for those prizes. We encourage your questions there in the questions pane of your audience console. Many of you have already found that questions box and have said hello or good morning or good afternoon wherever you are across the United States and around the world. Of course, we love to get those kind of comments and we appreciate them, but we also want to get your technical questions for our Q&A sessions. We'll also have some poll questions for you during the event. We also want this to be a social event. You can tweet directly from your audience console using the Twitter icon there on the screen, and the hashtag for today's event will be automatically appended. I also want to call your attention to the Handouts tab. It's there that you can find some hand-selected resources, including ebooks, special trial links, and more. So make sure that you check out the Handouts tab. The prize lineup for today's Megacast is 5 Google Pixel 6 Pro phones. These are some amazing new Google phones, and when you win one, you can select your choice of color. And if that wasn't enough, we also have Amazon $500 gift cards given out after each of the sessions on the Megacast today. That's roughly an Amazon $500 gift card every 30 minutes. Of course, you must be live in attendance to qualify for the prize drawings and meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions, which you can find there in the Handouts tab. We also have our best question prizes for an Amazon $50 gift card for each of our Q&A sessions on the Megacast today. That's a lot more Amazon gift cards, but you have to ask a question to be entered into those prize drawings and meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions that you can find there in your Handouts tab. All prize winners must submit an IRS form to Actual Tech Media, and we do reach out to prize winners via email after the event. If you win a prize and you'd like to help someone or an organization that needs your help, like the ones you see here on the screen, we would love to help you donate your prize value to charity. We've done that over the years and donated thousands of dollars to charity. So if you win a prize and want to donate it, we appreciate that, of course, in advance. We've done that in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club. I'll talk more about the Gorilla Guide Book Club here in just a moment. The hashtag for today over on Twitter is ATM Megacast, and it will be automatically appended if you use the Twitter icon on the bottom of the screen. You can always follow Actual Tech Media on Twitter for the latest and greatest in enterprise tech, and me, your moderator, David M. Davis. And I'll also be joined by fellow moderator, Mr. Scott Becker, later here in the event. Subscribe to all the Actual Tech Media social channels, YouTube, Facebook, and the 10 on Tech podcast. You'll find links to YouTube as well as LinkedIn right there in your audience console on the top right-hand side of the screen. Now, I mentioned the Gorilla Guide Book Club here just a moment ago. It's a great way to stay up to date on enterprise tech. These are free, easy-to-read enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts. You can find a link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club there in your Handouts tab, and also a link to our Refer an IT Friend page there in the Handouts tab as well. This is a great way to win Amazon gift cards. If you refer your IT friends or coworkers to our online event series, you both could win an Amazon $300 gift card The drawing for that is held monthly. We promise not to spam your friends or coworkers. They will receive an email inviting them to our upcoming events. If they don't respond, we'll send them one more reminder because we know everyone's busy. And if they don't respond from there, we promise not to bother them again. At the end of the event, you'll be automatically redirected to our event referral page as well. And with that, it's time to kick off our keynote presentation. I'm pleased to introduce you to Mr. Howard M. Cohen. Howard was a senior executive in some of the most highly regarded channel partner organizations in the industry for over 25 years. He served on advisory councils for IBM, HP, Apple, Citrix, and others, and consulted for many of the major technology companies in the world. He has a great perspective on disasters and data protection. Howard, it's great to have you on the Megacast today. Take it away.
Hello and welcome to Understanding Your Cloud-Native Data Protection and Disaster Recovery Options. I'm Howard M. Cohen, and I'll be setting the stage for all of today's discussions. First thing I'd like to do is tackle the word disaster. Define it. What is a disaster? What does disaster mean to us as people? Well, there was a time when this would have been considered the ultimate disaster, and indeed it still is. But short of that, earthquakes have been disastrous. Tornadoes of all kinds have been tremendous disasters, creating unbelievable damage in their wake. Over larger areas, hurricanes have created similar disaster and similar destruction. We've seen more hurricanes lately than we ever have before. Floods, we've seen more of those too, in more places. Again, disastrous. But the definitive disaster, the definitive non-existential disaster, is COVID-19. 2 years of misery, hospitals overrun, exceeding capacity, people being burned out trying to keep other people alive, and over 825,000 people dying here in the United States alone. As a result, people have been lining up to get themselves tested, then lining up again to get vaccines and boosters to protect against the virus. People have been sent to work from home, their children schooled from home. This has been a disaster of the worst kind, the worst we've seen in over 100 years. For those of us in IT, the disaster has been much more definable. The disaster has been a complete change in our threat surface. Used to be that we had everybody in one building. Everybody was using their computers in one building. Everything was stored in that one building. So we needed to scan the area around that building and look for anomalies on the network before they became threats or attacks on our network. And that was manageable. But with COVID-19 and sending everybody home, that threat surface became magnified, enlarged beyond measure. People's homes are dotted all over this map. And your threat surface may be in point after point after point, home after home of employee after employee, and you have to protect it all. That's complex. That's difficult. And it puts your data at threat. And data, of course, is the new bacon. It's more valuable to people than anything else. Your data assets are your business's most valuable resource. So your data must be protected. It's all about the data. So we manage our data in servers. Some of those servers are on our premises in our data centers. Others are in the cloud, public clouds, private clouds, hyperscaler clouds, all kinds of clouds. Um, Terrific. But wherever the data is stored, the one thing we know about data is data. Whether it's on your premises or in the cloud, whether it's the live data you use every day to manage your business and to conduct transactions and do other kinds of work, or it's simply a data backup you've created to protect against data loss, whether it's structured data, unstructured data, whichever kind of data it is, voice, video, text, doesn't matter. Data is data, and all data must be protected. And for that reason, what we need is a data management platform. One data management platform to manage every kind of data we work with. Before we finish talking about data, I'd like to talk a bit about the other definitive disaster that we all face. And that disaster is ransomware. This is a rolling disaster, an ongoing disaster. It is the most prevalent form of cyber attack in the world today. There are more ransomware attacks than there are any other kind of attack. And they're insidious because they attack people, not devices. Devices are consistent. They'll always do what you tell them to do. You can always find out what they've done. People are not so predictable, and people are not so controllable. People can make mistakes. People can get an email and think that it's perfectly fine, perfectly innocuous. Click on something and open the gateways to whatever attack the cyber criminal wants to commit. Usually, it's data corruption. And then once your data is corrupted, the thief calls, sends you a message, and says, I'll be glad to restore your data. Just pay me this insane sum of money. How do you defend against that? And the reality is, the best defense against ransomware, bar none, is a clean, current, readily available, safe data backup. That's right. Your best defense against ransomware is a clean, current backup, as current as possible, so that when the cybercriminal attacks and corrupts your data, you simply restore the last good backup, and you're back up and running. The cybercriminal could not have their way with you. Now, again, data is data. If you're storing it on your own premises, you want to make sure that you use best practices. For example, the 3-2-1 rule. You want to have 3 backups at least across at least 2 different kinds of technologies, backup technologies, and at least one of those copies taken off-site and stored somewhere else. And you want to drive all of it with policy. You want the entire data management schema to be policy driven so that it's more consistent, more predictable. Everybody knows what it is, everybody knows what they're supposed to do, which makes it more enforceable. So on premise data, 3-2-1, managed under policy. In the cloud, many people think they can depend upon multi data center replication. Yes, most cloud providers and certainly the hyperscalers all have hundreds, dozens to hundreds of data centers around the world. And your data is usually replicated at several of them so that if one is damaged in any way, lost in any way, your data is resident on another one. And you can fail over instantly and continue working. Fantastic. So multi-data center replication is a great advantage of cloud. However, most data managers that I talk to tell me they want to go beyond dependence upon that. They want to have their own belt and suspenders approach to data replication, data management, data backup, data protection. They want a last line of defense, a last resort. And so there are many different choices, many of which you'll hear discussed today. Again, data is data. And in your defense against the definitive disasters that we've been discussing and all the natural disasters that are besetting us more and more all the time, whether it's on-premise data or cloud data, data management, policy-driven data management is your best solution. And for the rest of the afternoon, you'll be hearing from a variety of experts to take that into much more detail. Thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of the event.
Great presentation, great points. Thank you so much, Howard. I learned a lot, such wise advice there, and it's a great way to really tee us up for the many expert presentations on today's Megacast. And speaking of which, I'm excited now to introduce you to our first presenter. Welcome, Jeff Inouye, Technical Marketing Architect at Rubrik. Jeff, take it away.
Thanks, David. Hey, everyone. Today I'm going to present on Rubrik and how we've modernized data protection and provided a disaster recovery solution for our customers. My name is Jeff Inouye. I'm a technical marketing architect here at Rubrik. My background is a wide range of IT experience, ranging from help desk support, administration, and architect roles. So within this session, we're going to take a look at an introduction to Rubrik and how we've modernized the backup stack. And we're going to take a look at how it works. So we're going to look at the design principles as well as the security and performance features. We'll take a look at Rubrik as a solution and what our customers love about our product. And then we'll dive into the demo and see a few features in action. So this is the solution that we're all familiar with. It's really the crowded multi-tiered architecture of backup. It's composed of complex software, hardware, and all the backup storage targets like tape and deduplication targets. So I come from an operations background, and deduplication targets were great, when they came out 10 plus years ago. They got rid of tape and they consolidated storage. But the problem really became that they still added more complexity, and really it was slow recovery times for just single files. So the idea of Rubrik is simple. We want to provide architectural simplicity through a zero trust scale out cluster. We also want to provide operational efficiency with features like our SLA domain policy engine, live mount, and API integrations. So many of our customers live in the multi-data center and multi-cloud world. They have multiple on-prem applications and services, and SaaS applications and cloud services in public cloud. So in 2019, we recognized this shift and we launched Polaris. And Polaris is a SaaS application that provides a platform for our modules, such as GPS for global management, radar for ransomware detection, and sonar for data classification. And through this portfolio, we're able to provide protection, governance, assurance and security, as well as data mobility. And all of this is encompassed through our APIs. So now that we have an idea of the architecture, let's take a closer look at how it works and the principles of our design, security, and performance. A key design principle is our API first approach. The simple way to understand this is any action taken within our interface can be performed through an SDK or directly working with the API. So what this does is it highlights the modern approach to our software development. It also provides endless integration capabilities. So think about service catalogs like vRealize or ServiceNow. It also allows the administrator to create operational workflows that can easily be built through our SDKs or other automation tooling that can consume a REST API. So an example of this is we can automate a live mount and then do a DBCC check on an automated or recurring basis. It also lends a hand to our rapid integration for new Rubrik software. So an example of this from our past is that we've federated data with Rubrik Polaris. Another key design principle is our SLA domain policy engine. So what this does is it uses a declarative method, and this allows the administrator to simply describe how they want workloads to be protected and establish the RPO and the data lifecycle. So from here, the software automates the generation, delegation, and execution of the prescribed task. So what it means is our customers don't have to worry about scheduling the backup, replication, archival, or data management jobs. So once we get this SLA created, it can be applied to any workload. These could be virtual machines, NAS data stores, or databases like SQL and Oracle. So from a security standpoint, Rubrik adheres to the tenets of the CIA triad, or confidentiality, integrity, and availability. It is extremely important to our customers, as well as us, to have confidence in the security of the backups. So what we've done is we've built in integrity with qualities like end-to-end encryption, role-based access control, and multi-factor authentication. The integrity of our backups are maintained throughout the system, and three key highlights are: one, the immutable file system. So what that means is that once a backup is ingested, it can't be modified from an internal or an external source. The second is that we have a zero trust cluster design. So every service and communication is authorized within the stack. The third and final is continual CRCs and fingerprinting in the background. So we can guarantee what you back up is what you restore. It also ensures that hardware failures or other corruption are identified, and we can maintain integrity. Let's face it, RPOs and RTOs drive the conversation of disaster recovery. It is a key metric for any disaster recovery plan. So here are a few ways that Rubrik is able to provide enhanced performance. One, the ability to delegate and perform parallel workloads. So within our task framework, we can divvy up those individual tasks and divide that up into data streams to nodes within a cluster. So we can distribute that workload for either a backup or a restore operation. The second is that we provide granular protection with near zero RPOs. So things like continuous data protection for virtual machines or log handling for databases. The third is our fast RTOs with our live mount features. Now that we have an overview of how Rubrik is architected, let's identify how Rubrik can be implemented as a solution for data protection and disaster recovery. The Rubrik solution itself boils down to two key pillars. One is the operational efficiency. So we can leverage our automation and policy-driven design to save time and technical debt, and clearly define the RPOs and have the ability to shift as the business needs. The second is our easy-to-use interface. So we want to reduce the stress during a disaster, and we also want to simplify the operational procedures. The third is that we can automate and use our APIs to create workflows and repeatable tasks. The second pillar is our architectural simplicity. So what we can provide out of box is security features like role-based access control, immutability and integrity of backups, and a security hardened system. It's also scale out, so we eliminate the need for forklift upgrades and redesigns of the configuration, or what I call from operations, the backup reboot. So when I was working in IT ops, we would always have to reconfigure our backups. And in that, we would have to rebuild the infrastructure as well, because our data set always continued to grow. So we would redesign, re-architect our backup infrastructure. And then over the course of say 6 to 12 months, it would start to atrophy. And we would have to perform what I called the backup reboot. Okay, so there's a lot of features that were mentioned in the presentation. So let's jump into the demo and we can take a look at the interface. Now that we're in the demo environment, we can take a look at our user interface. So from here, we can take a look at the summary dashboard view. we can identify system health and overall status of the cluster. So in the top left, you can see current jobs that are running. And in the center, you can see our cluster health. And in the bottom right, you can see the capacity of the cluster itself. So if we take a look at the monitoring tab here on the left, we can also see completed jobs from the last 24 hours. So this is really handy because we're now able to do search against a particular object name. And then we can see the tasks that have been done for that object. So things like backup or replication. If we want to look at the logs, we can click on the view button here, and we can see a nice detailed log for troubleshooting if needed. But really it gives you a sense of a simple and easy to use product that lends a hand to the administrator to identify and troubleshoot if needed. So during the presentation, we talked about SLA domains. So let's go ahead and create one of those now. So if we click on SLA domains and then local domains, we can then click the plus sign and we can create an SLA domain policy. So let's mock up what a typical customer would have in their environment. I'm going to go ahead and call this SLA domain policy tier 1. And at the top here, we can enable advanced features like continuous data protection. So the other nice feature that we have is advanced frequencies. So we can now accommodate schedules that are on a quarterly basis or on a particular day of the year for annuals. This is something that the advanced frequency feature can encompass. The typical model, though, is daily backups, and we'll keep those for 32 days. We'll do monthly backups, and we'll keep those for, say, 12 months. And then we'll do annuals, and typically 5 to 7 years is the typical retention cycle for most customers. So what we have here is, again, the declarative approach, right, to the retention and the frequency of which our backups will take place. So from here, we'll click Next, and we'll take a look at the archiving and replication options. So this little slider bar here, if we click on it, we can go ahead and select our archival location, which is in AWS. And then we can use this little slider bar here to determine how much data we want to protect, how much data we want to retain on cluster for fast recoveries. So a typical customer example would be we'll want to keep 45 days of backups on the cluster itself for fast recoveries, and then everything after that we'll go ahead and archive to the AWS bucket. We can also use replication by clicking this little slider bar here, and we can select our target cluster. So here this lends a hand to disaster recovery plans, and we can immediately replicate a snapshot that's taken on the cluster, on the source cluster, and then replicate it over to the secondary cluster. So this encompasses an SLA policy that would give disaster recovery solutions for our customers. So from here, we'll click Next, and we'll get a summary of the SLA domain policy that we're about to create. So really the key here is that we can take this SLA policy and now we can apply it to anything within the environment. So if it's a VM or a database or a NAS data store. So let's jump over to Polaris and take a look at the features there. And here what we're looking at is the GPS module, or the global management. And here we have, again, another summary and dashboard view. So here we can now identify the system health and the status of the entire environment. So if we click on clusters, we can actually see our state of 3 different clusters. These are separate Rubrik clusters that are attached to Polaris. And we can identify the system health of each one of them. We can also look at the inventory across the global environment, right? So everything from O365 to vSphere to AWS products or Azure. So for example, we can click on View under vSphere here, and we can see everything that our clusters have been backing up. Another nice feature here is that we can do search, right? We can search against this catalog, and we can perform recoveries from here. So we now have one centralized location where we can control our backup and recoveries from. A nice security feature here is that we aggregate all of the events from all of the clusters, right? So we can look at the past 24 hours, for example, and we can select multiple clusters if needed to identify and aggregate that information. The other is that we have an audit log, so we can now take a snapshot of successful logins and failures, things of the security nature that we need to capture. All right, so let's jump over to Radar. I know that we discussed that in the presentation. So if we click this tile, what we'll see and presented with is an event, right? So what our system has detected from this backup is that there's an anomalous event, right? So we can click on Investigate Snapshot here, and we can see from this File Explorer view, what has been modified or changed from the last backup. So let's look at something that's typical, like file shares. And what we can see here is we have suspicious events that are occurring within that data set. So let's click on Finance Department and drill down further. And what we can see here is now we have deleted originals that are replaced with encrypted items. So from this point, the administrator can simply click the deleted items and then perform a 2-click restore. If they wanted to, they could also perform a live mount of this snapshot and present it back to the vSphere environment. So let's go ahead and do that now. So here we're in the calendar view. We can actually roll back and say we wanted to go to the 16th, and we wanted to present that VM back to our test environment. So say if it's something for like security evaluation or something of that nature, or if we've deemed this a date with our other security tools that this is an okay replacement for what's in production, we can go ahead and perform that action. So we'll click on the snapshot and then click on recovery options. And here we're presented with a few different recovery options. But for our use case, we'll go ahead and live mount back to the test environment. So we can drill down to our cluster that has our test ESXi hosts. And then we can click on advanced settings and say if you wanted to ensure that the virtual network device was disconnected, we can go ahead and select that here. Then we can simply click mount, and that operation will now be sent down to the cluster, and we can present that snapshot back to the vSphere environment. So let me go ahead and select on this tab here, and we'll take a look at our recovery. All right, so what you can see here is the live mount operation presenting from the Rubrik cluster. So we'll present the storage and then use the compute to power that virtual machine on from that snapshot. So this lends a hand to disaster recovery operations that would be required in order to mitigate something like ransomware or some other type of event, like if it's known or unknown. So this is really the broader vision of Rubrik and how we're able to aggregate all of those clusters and all of those protectable objects within the environment. So if it's on-prem or if it's in the cloud, we want to be able to protect it and give a global view and really a source of truth to all that information. So with that, it looks like we're out of time. So I'll hand it back to you. Thanks, David.
All right, great presentation, really cool demo. Thank you so much, Jeff. We do appreciate that. We got a lot of great questions coming in from the audience. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted a question. We're going to be getting back to those questions electronically. The Rubrik team is responding as quickly as they can. I've just brought up a poll question here for everyone in the audience that says, what additional information would you like about Rubrik? And we appreciate your feedback there on the poll. We will have these polls after each session on the event today. So we want to, learn what you'd like to take as your next step. Do you want pricing information, a personal demo? Maybe you'd like to try it out for yourself, or just additional information. And I will leave that poll up there because we're about to start our first prize announcement here of the Megacast. We have, of course, an Amazon $500 gift card to award. And then we have, actually, hey, let's go ahead and just do our first grand prize of the award, or of the event. And those grand prizes are Google Pixel 6 Pro phones in your choice of color. So the first Amazon $500 gift card, this is going out to Clemente Muniz from Illinois. Congratulations, Clemente Muniz from Illinois. And thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll. We do appreciate your feedback. Let's go ahead now and bring up another poll. And this is in response to, or in regard to Howard's presentation, our keynote presenter. And the poll on the screen is, what types of disasters are your biggest concerns when you think about disaster recovery and data protection? Is it the R word, ransomware, or do you think about maybe hurricanes if you're along the coast somewhere, flooding, earthquakes, tornadoes, or severe storms, or even pandemic-related business continuity scenarios, civil unrest perhaps, or maybe insider sabotage, or even external actor sabotage. So I'm curious to see the response here to this poll. I know there's a lot of different options. If you don't see all those, you can scroll down there in the slides window, or you can make the slides window larger as well. All right, excellent feedback coming in. Let me share the results of this poll with you. And I think you might have been able to guess the results to this one. 87% said ransomware. Wow, incredible. Followed by, interestingly enough, 39% who said external actor sabotage, political or economic hacking. Very interesting. And then third place here was insider sabotage, followed by pandemic-related business continuity. All right, thank you to everyone who responded to that. And then last poll question here in this series before I introduce you to our next presenter, and that is, what's your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company, specifically around disaster recovery and data protection solutions? So you have hopefully some kind of data protection and DR solution in place. What's your time frame for updating that with new solutions or replacing it with some other additional solution that might be better suited for your business or your needs? And I'll leave that up while I announce our first grand prize, again, for a Google Pixel 6 Pro phone. This is going out to Chris Slaby, or Slobby, from Wisconsin. Congratulations to Chris Slaby from Wisconsin. We've still got 5 more grand prizes to give out on the event today and 6 more gift cards. All right, so thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll. We do appreciate that. But we'd like to keep the Megacast moving, so let's go ahead and bring in now our next presenter. I'm excited now to welcome Cody Hosterman, Director of Product Management for Cloud at Pure Storage. Cody, it's great to have you on the Megacast. Take it away.
Hi, my name is Cody Hosterman, and I'm a director here at Pure Storage of Product Management. And my focus for this conversation today is talk about cloud data protection and availability and what we're doing at Pure Storage to help our customers with this problem. So I think a key point to start here, of course, is that data storage, the technologies involved are different when it comes to what we have and expect and know on premises and what's available in the public cloud. There are technology differences, there are business differences. You choose and manage things in different ways. There are different considerations across the board. Some basics that are commonplace on premises, then provisioning, data reduction technologies, pretty much flat out don't exist in the public cloud. Choices around availability, around where this data can be protected to and how frequently, and in what ways and what places is different, depending on how you choose these other options. And of course, the management ecosystem, the APIs, integrations are a completely different model too. And so this means a lot when thinking about what storage do I choose and what are those options? What is the data protection possible for those data sets? How can I replicate and protect that to make sure my data is available through some type of a disaster? Now, when you actually look at some of the common hyperscaler storage options, there are a lot of choices. You look at Azure and AWS, for instance, here. You have EBS on the AWS side, you have managed S on the Azure side. There are a lot of different options. Within these options, there are a lot of choices that might make the right decision or the wrong decision for this application. And so you choose, you understand the ins and outs, the features that are available, the choices, and then you deliver that to your application. But if you choose one because you want the performance, do you have the data protection that you need? Does it have the replication and availability that you need? How do you make these choices? There's a fair amount of complexity around that choice. There are cost implications around those choices. And they change as these options get larger, more varied, new ones are introduced. Do you change how that works? Do you move that into the applications that don't have it? What applications need it? What don't? These choices have some gravity. Now, if we look at what we've done at Pure in the past, we'll take it on premises here for a second, is we've always focused on that simple evergreen promise. When you choose our storage, when you buy our storage, you're not just buying what you get today, you're buying what comes. We will focus on, for instance, flash with the on-premises all-flash storage that we have called the flash array to make sure that we're using the latest and greatest. Does the latest and greatest matter? How do we take efficient usage of that? How do we get the performance out of it? How do we apply our features on top of that? How do we introduce new features to that? And as the flash industry and our feature sets grow, so does that array that you bought. That's what we really call the Evergreen Promise, that you don't have to do migrations, and you don't have to buy new storage to take advantage of those features. It comes with the platform, it comes with the company. And this is something we've continued to build on premises for the course of our company so far. And this is what we decided to extend into the public cloud. And this is what we call Cloud Block Store. Cloud Block Store runs the same software that our on-premises flash array runs. Same exact code. The back end is fundamentally different. Cloud Block Store is an entirely software-based solution that gets deployed into your AWS or Azure environment that takes advantage of the AWS or Azure infrastructure. It takes those storage options. It understands how to make them, how to take the best durability, how to take the best performance, how to put these together into one simple product. We focus on the underlying requirements of the underlying hyperscaler and the storage and the ins and outs, and build that into Cloud Block Store. CBS keeps up with the technology and delivers that simple user experience to that application. The same APIs, the same integrations, the same features that are available with our hardware offering, the flash array that's on premises, delivered into AWS and Azure through the Cloud Block Store offering. The data reduction, the availability, the durability, it is built with those same concepts in mind, but of course, in a entirely software-based fashion. Cloud Block Store, or as we call it, CBS, is available through the AWS and Azure marketplaces. Not only can you purchase your licensing through this, you can also deploy the product directly from the Azure or AWS marketplace, either through CloudFormation or through ARM templates as the case or the cloud may be. Now, a core tenet around Pure in general and the Flash Array and Cloud Block Store is simplicity. We understand the eccentricities, the difficulties that come with underlying storage, and we build that into Purity. Purity understands that. Our engineers get those differences and keep up to date on the changes. And the end user just provisions storage. They say, hey, I need a volume, and we ask you 2 questions. What do you want to call it, and how much capacity? Efficiencies, performance, all that stuff, those are not configuration details from a customer perspective. That is what they're buying our product for. That simplicity. We deal with that and deliver enterprise class storage to them. Now, a key component around Purity, our operating environment that runs in Cloud Block Store, that runs in the Flash Array, is around data reduction, is around efficiency. And so the storage that we provision and our customers use are always thin provisioned, always deduplicated and compressed and pattern removed. You write a bunch of zeros, just gets completely discarded, and we just check some metadata. Efficient usage of storage. This is a key piece that we offer above and beyond the platform and the features itself. And actually, all of our features are built with these things in mind to preserve that efficiency when you're using our features, when you're replicating our data. Our snapshots, our clones, and our replication technologies take this in. And that's a really key piece of what we'll be talking about throughout the rest of this particular presentation around why that matters and what this has to do with overall data protection. This efficiency allows us to put more and more data into less footprint without taking penalties. So, CBS. Sum up before getting some of the details here is you can deploy this product into your own environment in a secure fashion. Enjoy all the features and integrated solutions that come with a Flash Array. So that same experience. And this is something that we've seen change when it comes to data protection with the cloud, is not only when you're protecting data across from on-premises into the public cloud, but just even potentially moving it, is that the same experience around features and integrations that you had before don't exist. And so that's a key part around the Cloud Block Store and Flash Array relationship too, is that maintaining the features that can be leveraged by data sets on premises. Provision that storage as needed to where it needs to go over the flexibility of, course, IP. And of course, choose when and what and where. A key thing around Cloud Block Store compared to hardware is that can be deployed whenever you want, as frequently as you want. And there's some additional flexibility that comes in mind when it comes to data protection. So let's focus on that point around Cloud Block Store and what we're doing at Pure. I think everyone agrees an important part of running your business is understanding your continuity plan, understanding your resiliency plan. When you see a large failure with some cloud, that doesn't mean don't use the cloud, right? That's a silly thing. It means, what is your disaster recovery plan? What is your business continuity plan? If that failure occurs again, or in a different way, in a different place, how does that affect your business? How does it affect your applications? How does it affect what's running there? What are you going to do about it? The data management tool that you chose, what is your option? What's your RTO? What's your RPO? What's acceptable by the business? Is 0? Is it seconds? Is it minutes? Is it hours? Is it days? Is it not having one? Right? How does that matter to your business? And to make this useful, you need some variety replication technologies to protect data sets in different ways, either due to business demands, government requirements, or something in between. Right? Some sophisticated enterprise class replication technologies that are also efficient matter. Efficiency in the cloud matters. Egress charges exist. This is a different consideration than often was focused on when it comes to on-prem. How do I make sure my data is where I want it to be when it's needed? And also, how do I make that friendly with my bill? And so these are some key functional needs when it comes to data protection in the public cloud. So a couple of use cases come out of this that I wanted to go into a little more detail on how we can help here. And it's not just around disaster recovery. It's around also migrating, getting data in, moving it where it needs to go, providing general higher availability, and of course, being able to take advantage of these copies too. Just because I'm using them for disaster recovery doesn't mean I can't also use them for other modes around dev test and copy data management and analysis of my DR workflows. And of course, testing your DR workflows is an important part of that too. And so efficiencies around that copying and usage is critical when it comes to that. So let's talk a little bit about the replication options that are available. So we have a couple different modes of replication that are supported on our product. So the first two I want to discuss here is our zero RPO and zero RTO active cluster replication technology. What is active cluster? Active cluster is our active synchronous replication, meaning that everything you write in one spot is available on that other spot as soon as acknowledged back to the host. When the host knows it's written in both of those places. And so if one of those places goes away, availability zone, whatever the case may be, wherever that's sitting, a data center on premises, a rack somewhere, that data is also in another place. And so if it entirely goes down, the exact full copy of your data is available somewhere else. No data is lost. The other option we have is asynchronous replication, which we call active DR. This is continuous replication, meaning that once something's written to one place, we send it as soon as we possibly can to the other place, providing RPOs that are generally measured in seconds instead of necessarily zero, which is what's guaranteed when it comes to active cluster. And so depending on your business requirements, depending on the distance between these targets, you might choose one or the other for protecting your applications. Now, to talk a little bit more about active cluster. Active cluster is something you're going to do to protect against provide extreme high availability, right? I want to protect against, on premises around rack HA. This rack went down. I want that rack to be able to pick up where that data left off. Or this data center went down, or that building went down. I want to be able to protect it. Or some failure happened at a larger scenario where I need to be able to protect it within 100 miles or so. We support up to 11 milliseconds round trip time between those two targets where we're active replicating between. And so this can certainly go across availability zones. So if an entire AZ has a problem, we can protect all that data to another one, or certain regions depending on their distance. Generally, you're going to see this across active regions. We can also combine asynchronous replication with our active cluster to protect in an active synchronous fashion in two places, and then asynchronously to a third far off place as well. So if you need even more sophisticated protection, we can do that. Active DR is that continuous asynchronous replication. And so this can protect across anywhere in the world. If you want your primary running in US West 1 and your disaster recovery in AP Southeast 2, you can protect from one cloud block store to another cloud block store in that particular region and availability zone. And of course, these don't have to be cloud block stores. One of these can be a flash array and the other one can be a cloud block store. They can both be flash arrays. Mix and match as your data centers need these data protections across either your own data centers, hybrid cloud, or of course within hyperscalers, or even across hyperscalers, as the case may be. So beyond active DR and active cluster, what are some of the direct benefits? I think it's worthwhile reiterating some of these points. Active cluster is zero RPO, no data loss when there's a failure, and zero RTO. That data is immediately available. With active cluster, not only is it available on both sides when you need it, it can be simultaneously accessed. So you can read and write to both sides at the exact same time if you so choose. This is not active passive. This is true active. Active DR is active passive. You use one side, it's protected asynchronously to the other side with an RPO of generally seconds. You can activate that secondary side for test scenarios, analytic scenarios, general dev test, of course, of that copy without affecting the underlying data sets that's being replicated on either side. And a key piece around this, of course, is maintaining that efficiency, maintaining that thin provisioning, deduplication, compression, pattern removal. So these replication technologies, the bytes being sent around, are efficient. We don't resend data sets and so forth. Everything's tracked and differentiated globally across these instances. And then also, when you want to spin up a test copy, it's 100% deduped with that source, so there's no additional footprint around it, making the usage of this also more attractive from a cost perspective. And a key piece around disaster recovery too is not just about making sure the data is there. That's totally an important part, no doubt about it. but also be able to use these data sets. And of course, snapshots and clones are a key piece of what we can do here. And I think that's a really important part of what comes with Active Cluster and Active DR. When you take a snapshot or a clone of a flash array volume or object of storage, it is 100% deduped. It's all just metadata pointers. We're not copying or moving data when you create snaps or clones. We're just saying, hey, here's a new volume that has the same pointers to this physical space, making it extremely efficient to use, allowing you to have more point in times that you might have had before because you're not adding additional footprint by just creating more snaps and more point in times. If you have 10 point in times or 2 point in times, right, the differences between that are all stored globally and reduced across the array. And so the actual extra footprint between having 10 versus 2 in the same kind of volume path is not very significant in its difference because of that data reduction. And everything that we mentioned before is included in this. And one of the reasons I bring up snapshots here in particular is when you're looking at disaster recovery, as I said, it's not just about the data that gets sent over there. It's also about what is the experience of my data when it gets failed over. Hey, I had a bunch of point in times that I created on my source site. Are those available on the other side when I fail over? Is that experience of my application consistent? Do I have the data, the QoS configurations, the snapshots, the point in times, the configuration information, the environmental information around my data over there as I'm protecting it? Often you protect the data or maybe one given snapshot, but not the ecosystem around that storage. And so there's a trade-off in that disaster recovery operation. With Active Cluster and Active DR, you're not just protecting the volumes data, you are protecting the environments. We're not only synchronously or asynchronously replicating the volume, but it's snapshots, its configurations, the QoS settings, all the point in times, protection policies, those all go with it. And so when you fail over, you have everything available that was available at that last point in time that was replicated, the snapshots and clones and so forth. So with Active Cluster, all your snaps, everything, the second you create it, it's there. With Active DR, it's all there within a few seconds. And furthermore, we have the ability to take those snapshots and also specifically replicate them in other ways. As I mentioned before, you can combine our Active Cluster with snapshot replication to send those snaps additional distances. You can send them between flash arrays, between cloud block stores, or across between those different models as well and different clouds as needed. And so if the cloud usage is around dev tests across my hybrid cloud or within it, you can do that too, whether on a policy or a one snapshot off basis. These things can be moved around. And another point I want to address here too is that the target doesn't have to be a cloud block store, doesn't have to be a flash array. It could be object storage. We can replicate our snapshots to AWS S3. We can replicate our snapshots to Azure Blob. These things can be sent to object storage or even file for longer term retention or a parking lot, if you will. And then you can restore those objects and those snaps to a CBS that's been deployed on demand or any other given flash array, giving you some more flexibility around your data sets. And of course, the benefit around that too is that you don't necessarily have to have the infrastructure up and running, ready to go for your DR plan. It can be parked in that object storage and then spin up the CBS and so forth on demand, giving you another option around how you protect your data sets. And so this opens up a couple more direct use cases around our replication. Protecting across the hybrid cloud, so from on-premises into the public cloud, and of course back. Our replication is bidirectional and differential in both ways. And so when you're failing back potentially to on-premises, we're keeping that data set very efficient, and we're only sending back those reduced changes that have occurred since that disaster happened. And that, of course, reduces the egress costs of resynchronizing back to the source. Of course, within the cloud, we can deploy CBS to CBS replication across availability zones, across regions, or really across clouds. That's a little bit less common in the DR situation. It's usually more of a migration or some kind of, I want to have a copy of this database over here for some application I'm testing there or whatnot. But these are possible all because flash arrays can be put in your data centers or colos, and CVSs can go into Azure and AWS on demand. Or even that cold disaster start that I mentioned before when it comes to object replication. We can send our snapshots to object storage and then bring them up. The last topic I want to bring up here too, of course, is around ransomware remediation. Big topic here because it's a fairly significant problem we have across the board. And it doesn't take a lot of time to find examples of this issue. And this is where our data protection comes through. Not only do we have replication offerings and snapshots that can be built up and secured, and these snapshots themselves are mutable, we have a safe mode offering that allows these volumes and snapshots that get created. You cannot delete them. They can only be fully removed through the passage of time. So someone that gets malicious access to your system literally does not have the credentials, even if they're administrator, to get rid of those data sets. A part of a ransomware attack is not only encrypting your source data or somehow hiding it from you, but also making sure you can't recover from it. And so the protection around not allowing someone to get rid of these snapshots, doesn't matter who you are within your environment, adds another layer of protection when it comes to our snapshots and replication. We call this feature the eradication timer, meaning it can be extended from 1 day to 30 days, saying, hey, when someone goes and deletes a volume, it actually sits in this recycling bin for quite some time. And a key part around this is the authorization. No end user, even admin, can change that eradication timer, nor fully or manually eradicate something before it happens. That is only set and changed with direct interaction with Pure Storage support. I appreciate your time today. I wanted to share a little bit around our vision around taking our Evergreen Promise to the public cloud, our features and our offerings, and continue to innovate with what that layer offers while providing all those enterprise class features around data protection, replication, snapshot management, and safe mode offering that we offer on premises and also offer them in the public cloud. If you'd like to learn more, take this QR code and check out our website. It's KBs, videos, blogs, all kinds of collateral, and certainly reach out to Pure Storage if you have any questions. Thank you.
All right, great presentation. Really cool what you all are doing there at Pure Storage with Cloud Block Store. Cody, you ready for some questions?
Yeah, sounds great. Sounds great.
All right. Well, for everyone out there in the audience, I first want to call your attention to the poll question that's on the screen. What additional information would you like about Pure Storage? And we'll leave that up here while we answer your questions. So let's see, first one here that came in from David in the audience is asking about credential management. Where are those stored and who has access to those when it comes to Cloud Block Store?
Yeah, so there's a couple levels of credentials. So when it comes to the user credentials, when you log in and so forth, that's up to your LDAP configuration, et cetera, how that is. So who decides that? Now, there are internal credentials that only Pure has access to. So for instance, I spoke at the end around safe mode and the ransomware protection. No customer has access to that. That's entirely secured by Pure, and there's no way to get in there to change the retention policies and things like that. When it comes to also encryption keys, depending on the cloud, we might use the different key stores in Azure, for instance, or AWS to secure and encrypt our data internally. The credentials from provisioning volumes and so forth, that's decided by the customer who has access to that. The back end is entirely secured by Pure, and only Pure has like root credentials to the client itself.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Here's another question from Sean who wants to know about replicating, maybe replication. I'm envisioning from on-premises up into the cloud. He's asking if that is bandwidth heavy. Is there other ways to control and monitor that?
Yeah. So there's a couple options here. Obviously, egress fees and things like that are super important to understand when you're talking about hybrid cloud in particular. So we have a Pure One offering, and this is our SaaS monitoring tool that shows you your replication statistics and so forth across your fleet. Of course, the individual instances of the product, whether it be on-premises with a flash array or CVS in the cloud, have their own internal GUI and REST APIs and so forth to report on those metrics. So there's a couple different ways to validate what's going on there. From an efficiency perspective, the key point around our replication is that we preserve our data reduction, right? We preserve our dedupe, preserve our compression, preserve our pattern removal, and most importantly, when it comes to replication, incremental and differential type of replication is really important to keep that WAN optimized quite a bit. And so it depends a little bit on your change rate and your data reduction ratios. Like on-prem, on average, we see about 5 to 1 for our on-prem appliances. In the cloud, we seem to see a little bit higher. Not that data reduction is better. It's just generally those are the types of things that people put on Cloud Block Store are things that can really take advantage of that data reduction in particular. So as always in IT, it depends a little bit, but efficiency and replication is really important. And that's really every feature on the FlashArray and Cloud Block Store are built with that in mind.
Excellent. Excellent. And then here's a question from Warren who wants to know, is snapshot backup the best practice way to recover from a ransomware infection?
So I think, there's always a long-going conversation around our snapshots backup and stuff like that. And the short answer is not fully, right? Snapshots are an important part of your data protections architecture, right? One of the benefits around snapshots of using that as part of your restoration policies and so forth is that we can do it instantly, right? So if you're really focused on RTOs when it comes to restore, having a snapshot of that data set, we can restore it on Cloud Block Store or the FlashArray instantly, right? It's a metadata copy, so it's within milliseconds type of thing. And so it's a key thing of, hey, getting up and running. Should snapshots be the only form of backup that you leverage? No, of course not, right? I think you need to have a sophisticated backup scheme that's involved around offsite backup partners, like Rubrik presented earlier. Like these are things that are really important. But snapshots are a key part of being able to restore that very, very, very quickly, and then also use those data sets for other purposes.
Got it. Okay. And then there's a couple questions here about the licensing model. How does that work?
Yeah. So the way we license, there's a couple pieces to this. One is we license based on effective use, right? So basically how much you have written, not how much you provisioned, right? If you create a 10 terabyte or 100 terabyte volume, we don't charge you for that. We charge you for what you've written to that. And then Cloud Block Store for itself will then reduce that back-end footprint. So what's actually committed down to the cloud is much less than it would be when you'd be writing directly. And so there's two benefits there, right? There's one, thin provisioning saves the amount you have to provision, right? Normal Cloud Block storage, you have to pay for what you provision. And then the back end, what we're actually using on the back end is less than two. And so the overall part of that comes to cost savings. So that's how we license our capacity. There's a couple ways to purchase that licensing. One is you can have what we call pure as a service contract. That's where you can license your on-premises capacity and Cloud Block Store and move that capacity between them, and the license goes with it, right? If you buy I'm just making numbers up. If you buy a 100 terabyte array on premises, and then next year you move 50 of those terabytes to AWS, for instance, on Cloud Block Store, the license goes with it. And so you're only paying for the 50 terabytes on premises, and then the other 50 terabytes comes from that exact same license. So you don't have to rebuy, or you're not licensing fees on premises, and so that goes with it. We also allow you to buy or provide the option to buy through the AWS or Azure Marketplace licensing for Cloud Block Store. So if you want that licensing cost to go against your EDP or something like that, that's also an option.
Very nice. Yeah, I love the flexibility of this. It's available in multiple cloud marketplaces. Sounds like it's super easy to get started. Cody, I'm afraid we're running out of time here on our live Q&A session. I see 23 other questions for you there in the electronic queue. Maybe you can get back to some of those folks.
Yep.
But
I'll answer them in text. Yep.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
All right. Thank you to Pure Storage for joining us on the event today. Check out the link that's there in your handouts tab, and that will take you to the Pure Cloud Block Store. And you can actually deploy right there on the page, deploy Pure Cloud Block Store into your AWS cloud or into your Azure cloud. There's also a ton of great video and resources here as well, all about Pure Cloud Block Store. So make sure that you check that out. All right. Appreciate everyone who responded here to the poll. Let me go ahead and announce our next Amazon $500 gift card winner. This is going out to Dan Weissman from California. Congratulations, Dan Weissman from California. And our next grand prize, this is for another Google Pixel 6 Pro phone. This is going out to Ed Parker, also from California. Congratulations, Ed Parker from California. All right, and with that, it's now time for our next presentation on the Megacast. I'm excited now to bring in Jason, who is a Senior Product Marketing Manager at NetApp.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, take it away.
I sure will. Well, thank you so much. And as mentioned, I'm a Senior Solutions Marketing Manager at NetApp, focused on data protection and security, and I'm really pleased to be here today. I recognize that I'm not the first presenter, so I'm going to pass on a lot of the data here, but it's fair to say that ransomware is a universal threat, and it's really sad to see that businesses of all sizes are being impacted by some pretty nefarious activities that are really focused on data and the viability of businesses. I just have one slide that kind of talks through some data here, and there's a lot of costs associated with ransomware. Some of them are fixed costs, and some of them are variable. If we look at some of the fixed costs, it's insurance premiums. Most companies have a cyber insurance policy that helps to protect against the possibility of ransomware attacks, and that's largely a fixed cost. The other side of it is the recovery costs. What happens if I do get a successful attack that impacts my business? I not only have to consider the possibility of paying the ransom, which obviously we do not recommend because that just emboldens these bad actors, but the downtime, loss of productivity, loss of revenue can contribute to a large amount of remediation costs. This is a stat from Sophos, which some of the other presenters may have shown, but in 2021, that number of recovery has increased over 2 times to the tune of about $1.8 million. And then finally, this idea of recovery oftentimes is about 10 times the average ransomware payment. So it is an enticement by companies to consider the ransomware. But once again, as I mentioned, that just continues to embolden bad behavior. Now, who cares about ransomware? There's a lot of people that care about ransomware. Depending upon who you are within your company, you're going to have various interests in either remediating, preventing, or the possible impact of ransomware. At the end of the day, though, most of the IT folks are the ones who actually have to design and implement solutions, and they're responsible for protecting the data, recovering in the time of an outage, and so they're going to care a lot about what I have to share moving forward. So NetApp can help here. NetApp's an expert in data protection and security as well as data management, and data protection is really part of our DNA. Now, when we look at ransomware as a topic, just want to point out here that NetApp's focus is at the data layer. It's at the data that people store. We don't offer application-based security or network security or end-user endpoints. We are focused on protecting your data. And as you look at the cybersecurity framework around identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, we offer capabilities within each one of these areas to help customers be able to, one, identify what type of data they have, be able to provide assessments to help them to improve their security posture. We provide capabilities to protect their data, detect potential threats, be able to respond to those threats, and ultimately be able to rapidly recover to get your business back running. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. Now, I'm going to share a few quotes from customers, and the reality is that ransomware is hitting everybody, but no one wants to admit it. At least very few people want to admit it. And so these quotes that I have here have been modified a little bit in terms of details to protect the customer, but these are quotes from our customers. One of the capabilities that we have is a product called Cloud Insights, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail later. But this particular customer found that it was the most reliable ransomware protection they found because it was able to distinguish between business as usual activity and an actual threat. And so we'll talk a little bit more about what we mean by that later. So let's talk about bringing in the specialists. NetApp looks at this multi-layered problem from multiple layers. At the foundation of this is infrastructure management. This is at the data storage layer, what we do to prevent and recover ransomware attacks. We then have capabilities around infrastructure monitoring to look at anomalies and threat detection. And then finally, we have services that allow us to do assessments, fully managed capabilities, as well as setup. And I'll talk to each of these categories. Starting with ONTAP. ONTAP is our flagship storage management software. And it offers a number of capabilities to help you protect your data, detect threats, and recover from the attacks that may hit your data. First and foremost, ONTAP allows you to block malicious files before they're even written to disk. We have a capability called F policy, which looks at file access behavior. You can set aside screening for files, so you can look at file extensions that you know are dangerous and block those from ever being written to disk, as well as see files that may be ones that you know are safe and be able to screen for those. And so it provides that level of screening of the file system before it actually impacts your data. We have the capability of our NetApp Snapshots. This is part of our core DNA. We've had and practically invented the snapshot. That's why it's trademarked over 20 years ago. And it allows you to create read-only copies of data that are space efficient and super fast. And a common used term for read-only is immutable. So you can't change these snapshot copies. And then finally, we have the ability to provide a logical air gap through a capability called SnapLock. And SnapLock allows you to do file locking of your data for a particular period of time. We have two different modes of SnapLock. One is an enterprise, which allows you to set up a time period and then be able to remove that time period and then make changes to that SnapLock volume if you choose. This is useful for things like if you're in a lawsuit and you need to have a legal hold, well, there's a fixed period of time or a variable period of time which you want to lock down that data to not change. The SnapLock compliance capability is once I set that clock, I cannot change that. Not even NetApp support can change that. And so this is really effective for things like healthcare records or potentially ransomware attacks where you don't want anyone able to get into your operating environment to make changes or to delete any of the backups you may have stored that have a SnapLock policy applied to it. In the case of detection, we can identify anomalous storage behavior indicative of malware attacks. This would be things like if my snapshots are starting to grow, that might be an indication that someone is encrypting data or they're writing more data than I would have expected. Also looking at things like efficiency ratios. If my efficiency of my data that I've applied deduplication, compression, and other technologies to that data is starting to change, especially getting less efficient, that would be an indication that files are being encrypted, since encrypted files cannot be deduplicated. And so I can provide these monitoring and then alerts to be able to notify admins of potential behavior that's odd. The next one is something that we announced today, actually, and this is using machine learning within the file system to detect suspicious file access patterns. What it's doing is it's looking at file entropy and data entropy to say, hey, wait a minute, this file system is behaving unlike it used to behave over the last period of time. And so through that machine learning, it'll then create events and send those up to your monitoring system to say, hey, there's a problem here. And if there is that problem, it'll create a snapshot volume as a recovery point to try to prevent any potential damage to the primary file system so you can have a recovery point. And then finally, these capabilities you can integrate with either Cloud Insights, which is our infrastructure monitoring capability, which has ransomware protection. I'll talk about that a little bit more later, as well as third-party user behavior analytics solutions that we integrate with. And then as it relates to recovery, so we can recover data in minutes and even as little as seconds using our snapshot recovery capabilities. And that can be both remote and as well as local. We can restore data quickly from remote copies or fail over to remote storage if we feel that there's a potential threat that's hitting our primary storage or if we have an outage. And then finally, we have the capability to provide logs and apply file level forensics to isolate the threat to make sure that we don't repeat the problem through an existing threat that might still remain in a copy. Now, data protection is a really important part of any type of ransomware protection. The ability to recover your data quickly is critical. And with NetApp, we have a capability called SnapMirror. SnapMirror is an efficient data replication capability built into the ONTAP operating system. So it takes those snapshot copies and replicates the changes to the data to a remote site. And that can either be another ONTAP device or it can be an object storage environment managed through Cloud Backup, which is our cloud-based service. It leverages that SnapMirror capability, which means that all of the data efficiencies are retained, and so minimal amounts of data are actually moved. And the capability to create space-efficient snapshots at a very granular level means that I can also replicate very granular level of changes between sites. So I can create snapshots in as little as 5 to 10 minutes, and I can have over 1,000 snapshots per volume, and that can also be replicated remotely as well. So lots of benefits associated with this. That little bit of data means that I have incremental forever backups, and it means that if I'm recovering data, I'm recovering very quickly as well, because I'm recovering deduplicated and efficient data, and only the blocks that have changed or the blocks that need to be recovered are then replicated back to the primary. Now, as we look at the infrastructure monitoring, we have some capabilities that we've added recently. ActiveIQ is our auto support. It's our data heuristics kind of platform that provides intelligence on what systems are doing, the performance of it, any type of potential threats or vulnerabilities to the system. It provides all kinds of information. This is available to NetApp customers. We've recently added the capability for ransomware defense as part of our ActiveIQ Digital Advisor. And this provides a set of prescriptive wellness checks to help protect customers against ransomware, and they can help them recover if they're impacted. And these checks really cover things like your snapshot count, data retention, your auto-delete of snapshot settings, whether F-policy and encryption are enabled. So these types of these health checks or prescriptive wellness checks help you to identify where there's a potential threat within your environment. As I mentioned, Cloud Insights is a cloud-based SaaS service that provides infrastructure monitoring not only for your cloud environment, but your on-prem environment. So it's a fully hybrid cloud-enabled capability. And there's a feature within it called Cloud Secure, which allows you to analyze user behavior in conjunction with your storage performance. And so we can look at things like detecting ransomware attacks by looking at how user accounts are historically accessing files and then changes in their file access behavior. We may see a user account that's suddenly reading a bunch of files and writing it somewhere else, which could be an indication of malicious activity. That could either be that someone's account got hacked and someone is now encrypting files, or it could potentially be that there's a rogue administrator or a rogue threat internal to the organization. And so with that, if that behavior is made aware, then the integration with NetApp ONTAP means that they'll be able to create a snapshot copy automatically to provide, once again, a recovery point against potentially malicious actors. And we have available within the service now the ability to block user accounts if we start to see unusual behavior that we don't like, which can help protect against exfiltration of data. Very, very powerful service. And if you're interested in this, whether you're a NetApp customer or not, we have a period of time for a free account with this. Here's another quote from one of our customers. In this particular case, this customer had a ransomware attack, and within 5 minutes, Cloud Insights was able to identify the threat, and they were able to then squash that threat and prevent it from propagating throughout their IT environment. So very, very powerful. Now, as we get into the infrastructure services, NetApp offers a variety of professional services to help customers assess their data protection and security posture. This particular service is a data protection and security assessment, and it provides on-site and professional service personnel from NetApp to assess your environment, and they provide a report that identifies gaps and areas where there'd be improvement in order to protect your security environment. Now, initially, this is available for ONTAP users within NetApp, but it is very, very powerful, and feedback has been excellent as to helping customers improve their security posture. Additionally, NetApp is announcing this week new NetApp Flex Professional Services. This Flex PX is very different by the user, so there's a variety of different tiers, and there's capabilities in terms of what this offers. For the most part, it's offering managed services and implementation services, deployment and setup for a variety of different capabilities within the cloud. But as you'll notice here on the enterprise tier, there is a ransomware monitoring and reporting capability which uses Cloud Insights and that Cloud Secure functionality as a managed service to then monitor your environment against any potential threats and to help you to recover your data in the event of any attack. So that's where we're headed in terms of our professional services, is to help customers have some type of umbrella capabilities through NetApp to help monitor and report and then remediate problems. Now I want to summarize a little bit here. So we talked about each of these layers, infrastructure management with ONTAP, infrastructure monitoring, and infrastructure services. And we're continuing to add to these functionalities. One of the things that I did not add here purposely was a capability we have called Cloud Data Sense. Currently, Cloud Data Sense is very, very powerful in its ability to identify what kind of data you have, where it's located, who has permissions to the data, in order to help you with your security posture. But it's not directly tied to ransomware per se. But as it relates to the cybersecurity framework in the identify area, Cloud Data Sense is powerful in that it allows you to at least know what you have and then make decisions on what you want to protect and how. Now, what I'd like to do is just briefly walk through the anatomy and prevention of a ransomware attack and show you where our technology fits in here. I can see that I missed an arrow there as part of my build, but we'll make it work. So looking at this ransomware attack, oftentimes what's happening, you'll see most of the data is that end users are the ones that typically are the avenue into a business, an organization where a ransomware attack will occur. They're typically unknowing that, it's the email that they get and they click on some link or they open up some file and suddenly it starts the process of the ransomware attack. Now, if your antivirus software seems to fail or something gets through, the malware is going to start being delivered and launch child processes. As it then connects with the command and control server, it'll start to deliver its instructions and start to encrypt files and mount drives. And now suddenly you then get this nasty little ransom note delivered to your business saying, guess what? You owe us money if you want to get your data back. It's really insidious. It's an awful circumstance, but it's something that we need to manage. NetApp ONTAP provides a number of capabilities at each of these stages. The first one is this immutable snapshot copy capability. NetApp has best practices and recommend the regular use of snapshots as recovery points. And as I mentioned, you can have various, you can have up to 1,000 or more, 1,023 snapshots per volume. And you can create them in a very granular fashion every 5 to 10 minutes if you choose. And then you can have various retention periods. So on my primary storage, I may keep 1 or 2 weeks of snapshots. On my secondary or tertiary, I might keep months or years of snapshots, depending upon how I want to manage that data. In the case of known malicious file extensions, we can block those through F-policy to prevent anything that we know of that we're aware of from getting through the system and only allow certain things to get through. We can identify anomalous behaviors. I mentioned with that new capability that uses machine learning to detect file system and storage layer behaviors to make sure that we understand what is actually happening at the storage layer. SnapLock uses indelible copies to prevent file encryption and backup deletion. As I mentioned before, this is a common practice where user accounts are hacked, backups are deleted, and then the encryption begins in the primary storage. Well, SnapLock prevents that by providing undeletable copies. And then finally, with the capability of Snap Restore, we can quickly restore data back to its original condition based upon a point-in-time snapshot, or we can mount a clone of that data and then grab whichever files we think we want to restore that have been encrypted and replace those with safe files. And then with the use of Cloud Insights, we can monitor user accounts to see what behaviors are anomalous or abnormal, and then provide preventative action against those. And then we can provide audit logging and timeline of the impacted files, and then identify where the problem started and then eliminate that problem. And of course, we can restore our data, avoid the ransom, and we can have a dance party. So, goodness there. Now, we recognize at NetApp that our customers use a variety of different software tools. And so we partner with the leading vendors to make sure that we integrate with them, they integrate with us in order to provide the best experience for our customers. We are very proud and very confident in our capabilities, but we recognize that not everyone is exclusive to NetApp, or that people have other forms of management that they'd like to pursue. So we integrate with Commvault, Rubrik, Veeam, and this long list of folks who take advantage of our snapshot capabilities and replication with SnapMirror. We also integrate with other vendors on user behavior analytics. So there will be UBA servers or solutions that take advantage of policy in our APIs. And then finally, we also leverage these same vendors to integrate with our forensic analytic, syslog, or SIM tools to make sure that we're able to provide the best outcome when we're analyzing our environments. This is one of my favorite quotes. So this is one of our customers. They had a ransomware attack, and their statement was the only data we could recover was on NetApp. And that's a real testament to the capabilities that NetApp has and how we're able to address the needs of our customers. And so finally, I just wanted to provide an invitation to you to consider NetApp. If you're a NetApp ONTAP customer, I'd recommend that you try out our data protection security assessment. Get a hold of your customer or look to netapp.com, where we have a brochure there that describes the data protection security assessment, and get one scheduled today. If you're new to NetApp, we have a list of lab on demands that are really informative. They can be 30 to 45 minutes. They're free to customers to allow them to test drive things. And in this particular lab here is focused on zero trust architectures and how NetApp can help you establish a modern environment to protect against the security threats that each of us are facing. So with that, I want to thank you for your time, and I think I'm going to turn it over to someone for any Q&A if there's remaining time.
All right, great presentation, Jason. I've just brought up the poll question for everyone out there in the audience. The question says, what additional information would you like about the NetApp solution? And we appreciate your feedback there in the poll. NetApp wants to hear, what next step you'd like to take. And so, let's see, lots of great questions coming in. We appreciate all the excellent questions. Jason, first question I see here for you, Chris is asking, do the instances or behaviors create automated alerts?
Do the instances create automated alerts? I guess I need a little bit more information on that question, but we do have an event management system. ONTAP does create alerts for most of the activities that are needed, and those can either be read in through your own event management system through a set of APIs, or through our own management tools such as System Manager, Unified Manager, or Cloud Insights. So I hope that helps. But yeah, we do have a very active and robust event management system.
Okay, excellent. And then this question here, they're asking, do the admins get notified when a malicious file is blocked or detected?
Yeah, so I think this is referring to F policy, which stands for file policy. And ONTAP has the ability to identify file system behavior, what files are being accessed and by who, and then we can establish these, what some call whitelist, blacklist, which is I can either block known malicious file extensions, or I can permit only those that are safe. We do not specifically provide alerts for files that get blocked, but we establish a user can establish his own list of blocked malicious file extensions as part of their security posture.
Okay, nice. And then here's a creatively asked question. Christopher, I have to give him credit for this. Does NetApp have any recommended songs or dance moves to avoid the ransomware dance party?
Oh, that's awesome. Not being a great dancer myself, I don't know that I'd feel comfortable providing that kind of counsel, but I think whatever brings you joy that you avoided an attack, I think is a great way to, or avoided the ransomware payment. I think it's a great first approach.
Absolutely. Let's see, another good question here. They're wanting to know, does NetApp Cloud Volumes ONTAP support third-party AV or malware software?
Yeah, so we have integrations with third-party virus protection software, malware software. And so that is definitely an opportunity to provide support through third-party vendors.
Okay. Okay, good. And then what about, can you go a little bit deeper into why immutable and indelible storage is needed?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people get confused with the idea of immutable. So what happens typically in a ransomware attack is that a hacker is going to want to get in and remove the ability first for any company to be able to recover their data. So they'll look and see if they can get admin accounts or compromised accounts and try to find the backups and delete those backups, which slows recovery. Once they can do that, then they will start encrypting the production file system. That creates a problem for the admin because now he either has to go back to tape or some other form, which can dramatically delay the recovery of data. Now, NetApp snapshot copies are immutable, which means they can't be changed. They're read-only copies. We have a feature, FlexClone, which uses the same technology but provides read-write capability for things like application development and test, DR testing, analytics reporting, et cetera. But the immutable copy is the snapshot. The indelible copy, which means it cannot be deleted, is when we apply worm file locking through SnapLock. And so we can lock files for either short-term retention, long-term retention. We essentially have two modes that I spoke to. And so you can either use that as an internal policy for things like legal hold, or you can establish it for compliance, which means that not even the NetApp support can remove or change that policy. It is fixed in time for that period of time. So having both is really important to prevent the deletion of backup or deletion of recovery data, and then having immutable means that those snapshots cannot be encrypted.
Got it. Okay. And then I think this question kind of goes along with that, and that is, can ransomware encrypt on-tap snapshots?
No, they can't. So NetApp snapshots, as I mentioned, are read-only, and so they can be deleted as part of your data protection policies, right? You don't want to keep, granular snapshots around forever. It takes up space. So you'll have a deletion policy, but they cannot be changed.
Nice. And then what if someone doesn't have NetApp right now on premises? Do they need NetApp to use NetApp in the cloud?
No. So NetApp has a number of storage products and data services that are in the cloud that are across the three major hyperscalers. We also have offerings through IBM. But we have either fully managed services in partnership with those vendors. Amazon has announced recently FSx for NetApp ONTAP. Azure has Azure NetApp Files, all built on NetApp ONTAP. Then we have a similar product, Cloud Volume Service with Google. But we also have a version of ONTAP that is software-defined that runs in a virtual machine in the cloud, and that's Cloud Volumes ONTAP, and that's available on all the hyperscalers as well. We do have customers who are new to NetApp but through our cloud offerings, and then may see opportunities to move on-prem if that becomes part of their IT strategy.
Excellent. And then so I know the URL is cloud.netapp.com. Is that right?
Cloud.netapp.com is what we call Cloud Central. That's where customers can go to learn more about our products, activate free trials. Similar information is available on netapp.com. But if customers want to start engaging with the products, then cloud.netapp.com is the place to go.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds like a great way to get started to kind of try this out for yourself. Let's see. I'm afraid that's all the time we have really in our live Q&A session. But a really great presentation, Jason. Thank you so much. And I see over 20 questions there still for you in the electronic queue. Maybe you can get back to some of those folks. Thanks for being on. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And for more information on NetApp, check out the Handouts tab as well. It's an infographic there, cool resource, 10 reasons NetApp for ransomware protection is the best choice for you. So make sure that you check that resource out. And as I mentioned, cloud.netapp.com is also an excellent resource. You can try out many of these solutions there at that website. All right. Thank you to everyone who responded to the poll. It's now time for our next Amazon $500 gift card winner. This is going to Richard Torrisi from New Jersey. Congratulations, Richard Torrisi from New Jersey. And now it's time for our next presentation on today's Megacast. It's my pleasure to introduce Stephen Manley, Chief Technology Officer at Druva. Stephen, take it away.
Really, we want to kick this off, again, as we just saw in the poll. Most of you are already running something in the cloud, one cloud or another. And for those of you that either looking to it in the next 6 months or not really sure, sometime post 6 months, one of the things we often find as we talk to you is turns out somebody in your organization is running in the cloud. They might not have told you yet. But regardless, protecting data as you move to the cloud becomes important, and it's a different challenge. And so as we go through this, one of the things that we find is the market is shifting. Right? So whether you're in Azure, whether you're in AWS, whether you're doing VMware Cloud, whatever cloud you're doing, the world of data protection has changed quite a bit in the last 5 years. From, first a world where your data is in multiple locations. You have data centers, you have remote offices, you have edge, you have cloud, you have SaaS applications, and you can't just work harder to be able to protect all of that data. You've got to find a simpler way to be able to protect it all. Because it is sprawled in so many locations, you're going to need something that can connect to where your data is wherever it is. And that's why cloud data protection for cloud becomes so important. Is the last thing you want to do is think to yourself, well, I'm moving data to cloud. It would be great if I could keep protecting that back onto my premises, because I think egress fees are a wonderful thing to pay. Another thing that we see, especially as organizations are looking at developing new kinds of applications, and I know in the introduction, there was discussion about Kubernetes, containers, obviously things like databases as a service. It's really important to, I think, as new infrastructure emerges, to always remember that the thing you're looking to protect is the application. And for years in traditional backup, we often conflated, well, if I just protect this server, if I just protect this virtual machine, well, that protects the application inside of it. As the world gets more distributed, as you start running containerized applications, you really do need to start thinking about, how do I protect and recover applications, not just infrastructure? Because in a Kubernetes world, infrastructure becomes more and more ephemeral. It's the application that lives on. As you look at cloud, and I think those of you that are already heavily engaged in cloud, there is a rich and complicated ecosystem that you've got to plug into. There is no such thing as a standalone silo in the cloud anymore. You've got to be able to plug into something more. And then finally, one of the things I think we all see is partially unleashed by cloud, and the fact that it's frankly inexpensive for cyber attackers now to sort of allocate resources. But in general, the need to extract more value from your data is becoming more important than ever. And so, some of what we look at is then breaking this into two chunks. The first chunk is, look, how do you make this simpler? You've got to make the day-to-day job simpler, because the world is getting more complex, and it's the only way you can keep up. And if you can make it simple enough, you can actually turn protection into a way to accelerate how you move to cloud, because it becomes that safety net where the organization says, great, no matter where the data is, no matter where the data is moving to, I know it's safe. And then once you solve that first part of, we made this simple and trustworthy, then there's that second discussion of, how can I bring more to the table? How do I solve some of the new challenges that are emerging? And so in our world, again, we look at this very much as data protection historically in an organization has been the one thing. Maybe antivirus scanning is the second, but data protection has really been the one thing that touches everything in the environment, whether it was traditional Oracle, Microsoft SQL databases, virtual machines, NAS servers, endpoints like desktops and laptops, and now, again, cloud workloads. Data protection is the one thing that has to be able to work across all of those. Because you're not going to, you really don't want to be in a position where 23 different groups are telling you, no, we got this. Because we know instinctively, like so many things, data protection, security, these are things that are not usually top of mind, especially for application teams, application developers, business units. That's not their first thing they're thinking of. So you really do need a centralized infrastructure, a centralized team that can say, we got this. We got this covered. No matter what's emerging, no matter where it's emerging, we've got control over it. And because we've got control over it, we can not only protect the data, but again, bring in intelligence for governance, for cyber resilience, and more. And so it becomes absolutely critical, especially in the face of this data sprawl and in the face of moving to the cloud. You need a solution that's going to unite everything. Because if you're spanning across multiple silos or you're depending on different parts of your organization that frankly don't have an expertise or a priority on this, you're going to end up exposed. And so this is where you really want to think about, how do you design for cloud? And this is really the same no matter whether you're talking about designing a data protection service or you're designing a new application or you're designing a compliance service, whatever it is you're looking at. If you're going to build for cloud, what's the right way to do it? And this is really if you're building from the ground up. Now, we get that not everybody has the opportunity to build from the ground up, but if you can, that's what you want to be able to do. And so you start with services, whether it's AWS, Azure, GCP, et cetera. And then what you want to build on top of that is really what's the anchor of what you're doing. Now, in our case, because it's data protection, the most important thing, of course, is protecting, securing the data reliably at an efficient cost for an extended period of time. And then once you've found that core piece, then the next thing you have to look at is how do you design this so it's scalable? Because, again, no matter what service you're talking about, if you end up allocating fixed resources, it ends up being a challenge from managing and running applications. So you're going to want something that is flexible and dynamic, and of course with the zero trust security mindset built in, so that obviously it can't be exposed. And then finally, of course, like we said, there is a modern ecosystem you've got to be able to plug into. So it's got to be API driven. It's got to be simple to be able to integrate into the world around it. So no matter what you're looking at, whether it's data protection or it's building a new web application, this is how you would design from the ground up to be able to actually leverage the value of cloud. And so, when we start then pivoting into, so you need to protect data in the cloud, what are some of the things that you want to look at? The first one is, in this modern world where there is so many applications, there is so much data sprawl, it becomes critical that while you as a central team have oversight over everything that's going on, you do not want to be in the position where you have to manage everything by yourself. It simply won't scale. As you get into a world where people are able to spin up Kubernetes clusters and spin up applications quickly, you don't want to be in the critical path of deploying those. And so it becomes increasingly important to say, what's the centralized role versus what are distributed roles? What can be done self-service? And then as that centralized team, be able to again get insights into what's going on so that you can step in when need be. Whether it is to optimize for cost, optimize for security, optimize for compliance. So the system should be giving you information as opposed to asking you to figure it out. It's got to be fast, right? And there can't be infrastructure to install. This is cloud. This should just be something that just works. And especially in the land of data protection, because you do have to connect with everything, this needs to be something that updates sort of transparently for you. Because if you have to go through can I upgrade this? What about this dependency downstream? This is going to take me 3 weeks to upgrade to be able to get the newest features. Well, you're not going to be able to keep pace. So as you start looking at cloud data protection, how do you split between sort of application owners and central team? How does the central team get value so that they don't have to babysit everything? How do you make it fast to install and scalable? And how do you make sure that you're not babysitting sort of software updates and software upgrades? Because one thing that you're going to find, no matter where you are in cloud, is there's not going to be a definition of the cloud workloads you're backing up. When we go into our customer environments, what we see is, for some people, cloud means I've got SaaS. I'm running Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, Salesforce, all the different SaaS applications, that's cloud. For other people, cloud is, I've really built cloud native applications just the way that I walked through that sort of Druva architecture. They've got applications that are built from the ground up on again, Kubernetes or container services or using database as a service or serverless functionality. They've bought into cloud completely and have dynamic, flexible applications. But in that same environment, you will have users that are lifting and shifting applications from on-premises to the cloud. So there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. And you add on top of that the cloud itself has to be protected. As we were talking about, there's complicated network settings, security settings, groups, gateways, the whole thing. So there's the application, but there's the environment. And so it's really critical as you start thinking about what multi-cloud backup means. It means SaaS, it means cloud native, it means lift and shift, it means across different clouds, and it means the cloud environment itself. You need to be able to protect all of those because missing any of those leaves you exposed and leaves your company exposed. And so a good example here, someone like a Suez, they were absolutely moving into we want to move towards the cloud. And what they found is as they moved to the cloud, backup was really the long pole in the movement because they found that, well, do I install a second backup application in the cloud? Do I just try to script things in the cloud? Things got chaotic out of hand and was really slowing down their move to the cloud. And so by shifting to saying, well, the protection is always in the cloud, whether the data is on premises today or in the cloud today or shifting between them, if I have that one central anchor where I know that I am protected, no matter where the data is moving to, then I don't have to worry. I've got a common policy base, a common infrastructure, a common way of running everything. And again, this is where that data protection, it's not just, hey, I'm keeping it safe, but I'm keeping you so safe that you can actually move with more speed and shift to the cloud faster. And so that unified experience becomes absolutely critical. The moment you start creating data protection silos is the moment that you start to become a bigger bottleneck for your organization moving to cloud. Now, like we said, you've got to make shifting to cloud simpler. That is a key aspect of everything that's going on. But then, the reality is the requirements are extending. So ransomware protection and recovery, ransomware doesn't just hit data centers or remote offices. Ransomware hits environments running in public cloud, whether it's cloud native or lift and shift. Ransomware is affecting SaaS applications. You've got to be able to protect yourself from a ransomware attack no matter where the data lives. Compliance regulations apply just as much to data and applications running in cloud as they did on the data center. Understanding where your storage and your compute and your investments are going in the cloud is just as important, if not more so, given the dynamic costs and sometimes the surprise bills you get. And as we were talking at the beginning, disaster recovery becomes more and more critical because you're running these business critical applications in the cloud, the things that are customer facing. It becomes more and more important to be able to say, can I keep these workloads running? And one of the benefits to cloud is because things are more encapsulated, you actually have the chance of delivering a better disaster recovery solution in cloud than you were ever able to do on premises. So just starting with that disaster recovery piece, because it is so important. There are some people who look and say, I want to use cloud as my disaster recovery target. I don't have to pay for a standby infrastructure. I simply allocate resources on demand in cloud when I need to run the disaster recovery. And that's absolutely a great option. It's a good way to even start to sort of get your feet wet in the cloud if you're one of the people that are going in 6 months or beyond 6 months. But once you're in the cloud, again, it is so much easier to be able to run a disaster recovery because your environment is significantly more homogeneous. The more common the environment is, the easier it is to run a DR. This is why we never traditionally run DR from one type of NAS system to another, one vendor to another. Why it's so difficult to say run a DR from VMware to Hyper-V. But if you're in what is a more homogeneous environment, it's a lot easier to set up the disaster recovery because the configurations are common. Doesn't say that it's easy, but it is easier. And again, because it can be standby, you don't have to invest a lot of upfront money, nor do you have to invest a lot of management because it can become a one-click thing. And what we find is, as you look at disaster recovery in the cloud, about 40 to 50% of the disaster recovery events we help people with now are in response to ransomware attacks. So ransomware has become the new trigger for disaster recovery, much more so than natural disasters or massive system failures, things like that in a data center. And so as you start looking at how do you protect from ransomware, because again, ransomware will hit you just as hard in the cloud as it does on your data center. Step one is always make sure the data is safe. Because it doesn't matter how fast or how tricky or how amazing the thing you can do, if that data isn't recoverable, if you don't have it securely held, you're not going to be able to recover from the ransomware attack. So it's really important to say, my ransomware protection, again, built in from the ground up. You know, there is no separate thing to configure that someone could make a mistake on. There's no window where something could slide in. You want immutable backups that are off-site in a separate account and managed separately so that you know that the data is safe. And then once you're confident that your data is safe, then you want to start thinking about, I could do better at recovering. I could look at orchestration, disaster recovery, leveraging the cloud, intelligence in the cloud, using analytics to identify the ransomware earlier, being able to search for what's affected so that you can make a response more quickly. So cloud opens up these opportunities because, again, the on-demand resources that can run the analytics, the on-demand resources that can run the recovery, validate the data before you recover, all these things are possible once you start looking in the cloud. But again, step one is always make sure the data is safe. Because if it's not safe, the rest of it doesn't matter. And for it to be safe, it should be as automatic as possible. As we all know from disaster recovery, for as long as you know, the moment humans start to intervene, that's when mistakes happen. So the more automatic, the more automated that you can make this, the better off you are. And this, again, a good example is a company called Vertrax, who, again, was hit by a ransomware attack. And because they had multiple consoles, because they had data sprawl, they had multiple consoles, it was incredibly difficult for them to recover from ransomware. They shifted to, again, more of a centralized solution with us, which made it easier to figure out what data to restore, faster to restore the data because they were able to leverage the scalability of the cloud, and reduced cost because there were no standby resources. And so it enables them with that built-in security, the centralized management, to just make things easier. Because again, when the ransomware attack happens, and it will happen, the more it's just a single button to click, the more that you can automate, the better off you are. Let the people focus on assessing the damage and the impact. Let the systems take care of protecting and recovering the data, the systems, the applications. And that really takes us to the last part again. As you start looking at cloud, one of the most important things again is transparency in terms of what you're paying for. So be sure, we've all seen the surprise cloud bills with crazy egress fees or puts and gets fees. You really want something that's going to be simple, predictable, and transparent. A single price so that you know what you're paying and when you're paying it. And so it's absolutely critical that as you start looking at protecting data in the cloud, that you're able to manage the costs. Because there's nothing that's going to slow the cloud down more in your cloud journey than a bill that you were not expecting. And so this is why, again, as we work with customers, in different stages of their cloud journey, from, well, we're still on premises, but we want to try maybe disaster recovery in the cloud, to, well, we're on premises with a lot of remote offices and we're worried about ransomware. We'd love a centralized ransomware protection solution. To, we're starting to, like Suez, move some workloads to the cloud. We want a common solution that makes it easy for us to move with a centralized protection approach. To, we're cloud native and we've got a lot of workloads running and we want to be able to protect those and keep them available with disaster recovery. Wherever you are on that continuum, Druva can help you get started, and we can also help you as you go from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 all the way to phase 5 of your journey in the cloud and whatever is beyond. And so, this is the reason, pat ourselves on the back. Obviously, one of the things we tell a lot of customers is, Gartner has shifted the Magic Quadrant from being a data center backup and recovery to an enterprise backup and recovery for the same reason that everyone's on this call. The data isn't just in the data center anymore. And so it's important to look across the environment, to build a solution that can span across the environment, because new workloads are coming, and they're just as important, if not more important, to protect than everything we've been protecting in the past. And so you're going to want a data protection for that world. And like we said, first, make it simple. Make it simple to protect your data no matter where it is. Second, by connecting to the data wherever it is, it makes it easier to move because you know you have the safety net. And once you've got that protection data in place, start to focus on how can you optimize for the new regulations that are coming, and of course the new cyber attacks that continue to emerge on a daily basis. With a solution that ties all of these together, you're going to be able to move to cloud faster, move to cloud more reliably, and focus on adding more value to your business. And we encourage you, again, 15 minutes or less, try it out. It doesn't, there's no hardware to install. See what it costs, and give us a call and see if we can put some beef behind the bull that I just shared with you. And with that, I'll open to Q&A.
Great presentation, Stephen. We do have some questions for you from the audience here. Can Druva protect the Microsoft suite of products in the cloud?
Absolutely. So ranging from obviously things like Microsoft 365, Exchange Online, OneDrive, Teams, SharePoint Online, so all of those components of the SaaS application, we absolutely can protect those. On top of that, we have customers that, again, if you're running workloads in Azure, whether it's you're running SQL or, again, you've lifted and shifted some applications to run inside of Azure, we absolutely can protect those as well. So if you are an Azure customer or a Microsoft 365 customer or both, we absolutely have customers, and we'd love to walk you through how we can help you protect your data wherever it is.
Excellent. There's another question here. Does Druva support immutable snapshots or immutable backup?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, there's multiple levels here in terms of protection, and I won't go too deep in this. But the first thing is when you take a backup, the most important thing, again, from an immutability perspective, is it should not be able to be modified. And so Druva backups, when they are put into the cloud, the way we store them, they cannot be modified. So the data you put in is the data you get out. Now, on top of that, of course, you also want to make sure that the backups can't be deleted. And so Druva also then makes sure that, again, no rogue process can come in and delete your backups because everything goes through Druva. And if you had a rogue internal process that tried to call Druva and say, well, please delete all my backups for me, we will also put a hold on those to make sure we get full validation from the customer. Even if you've already been through the MFA, even if you've been through all the steps, if we see anything unusual, we would say, you're trying to delete a lot more backups than we've seen in the past. Let's make sure you're in control of your account. So not only is the backup immutable, but we're also watching your account to make sure that there's no unusual behavior either in terms of accessing your backups or trying to eliminate your backups.
Excellent. They're also asking here, is there any way to scan the backup data to know if it's been infected with ransomware?
Absolutely. So that is also part of what we'll do is, before you restore data, and we have a lot of different workflows that you can choose from, but certainly before you go to restore data after a ransomware attack, you can absolutely scan. We can run a scan of that data looking for obviously malware signatures and eliminate those. We also have a lot of customers who will also then run the disaster recovery in sort of a cloud sandbox so that they can run their own scanning tools on top of it. So belt and suspenders, if you will. And if it's past our scan and it's past their scan, then they'll trigger the sort of the streaming recovery back into live production. So you can trust our scan, you can trust your scan, you can do both, depending on again what your processes dictate.
Very nice. I'm not sure you can answer this one, but let's give it a try. They're wanting to know, how fast can I recover using Druva in the event of a disaster?
So yeah, there's a bit of a tiered option there. So we do offer an on-premises cache if you are worried about network bandwidth for an on-premises recovery, for example. We do offer an on-premises cache that can hold up to 30 days of backups. So if you are on sort of a low bandwidth connection and you depend on the deduplication for the backup, you might want to hold some local cache copies for a rapid recovery. If you have a faster network connection, especially if you're sort of partnered up with Equinix or someone like that, we can stream back at network speed. And then, of course, like we said, you can also recover to the cloud. We have a number of customers who recover on-premises, let's say virtual machines or on-premises servers, and they'll actually just recover them in the cloud. And sometimes, after they've done that recovery, they said, we were going to migrate that anyway, so migration done. So you really have, again, that tier of options depending on what you're comfortable with. And again, you can mix and match on those.
Very nice. And then what about protecting workloads like NAS servers?
Yeah, so NAS servers is for most of us been a challenge for forever. Right? So many files, really hard to keep track of. And on top of it, the NAS servers themselves have excellent localized protection options, snapshots and replication. And so there's always been this challenge of, usually I've got a longer term retention on my NAS than say VMs or databases, 7+ years. I don't necessarily need all the short-term performance optimizations because I've got my snapshots and my replicas. And so Druva, in addition to just, hey, we can back up your NAS the same as everything else, we also have options to say, you could back up your NAS, but in 15 days, push it to cold storage for that long-term retention to save about 30% of your cost. Or you could back up directly into cold storage at about 50% of the cost, knowing that realistically, again, your recovery time will obviously be slower. But if you're running all your short-term recoveries off of snapshots and replicas, why not effectively push directly to the coldest tier of cloud to effectively replace what you were probably in the past doing with tape? And so we've got those three options: regular backup tiered to long-term retention, or just directly put it into cold. And obviously you save money each step along the way depending on what you choose.
Excellent. All right. Well, Stephen, I'm afraid that's all the time we have in our live Q&A. It sounds like Druva's got just a ton of flexibility to offer when it comes to cloud-native backup. Thank you so much for your presentation today.
Well, thank you, everybody, for your time. Have a wonderful day.
I've just brought up the poll question for everyone out there on the screen that says, what additional information would you like about the Druva solution? Of course, we appreciate your participation there in that poll. We want to get your feedback. Druva wants to know what is the next step that you would like to take. And we appreciate all the excellent questions coming in as well. The experts from Druva are responding to those electronically as quickly as they can. It is now time to announce our next prize winners. Scott Becker, you ready to announce those winners for us?
I sure am. Yeah, and thanks, David,
Awesome.
thanks for hosting an excellent event so far. We've got lots more great sessions and content coming up for everybody. But yeah, let's move on to that prize drawing. And I will leave the poll up here for just a minute while we do the prize drawing. But the winner of the next $500 Amazon gift card is Fatan Mansour from California. And the winner of our next grand prize, that Google Pixel 6 Pro phone, is Joe McAllister from Colorado. So congratulations to Fatan and Joe. We will be in touch about claiming your prizes. And I'll just leave that poll up for just another couple of seconds just to give everybody an opportunity to fill in their preferences. And then we will be moving on to our next session. Now it's time for our next presentation in the Understanding Your Cloud Native Data Protection and Disaster Recovery Options Megacast. Our next session comes from Unitrends, and I am delighted to bring on our next speaker, Adam Margett, who's in product marketing for Unitrends. Adam, welcome to the Megacast.
Scott, thank you so much. Can you hear me all right?
I hear you great. Yeah, take it away.
Excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us here. As Scott had mentioned, my name is Adam Margette. I'm a member of the product marketing team here at Unitrends. And my question for the audience is, I'm curious where you're at. You don't have to type this in and flood the chat, but have you started to embrace the cloud? Last year, global cloud spending increased more than 22%. So that global market, about $270 billion in 2020, moved to nearly $332 billion in 2021, as a lot of organizations were accelerating their cloud usage due to the pandemic. And for a lot of organizations, cloud has helped them to improve their efficiency and their agility. A lot of these options today are faster, they're more secure, they're more cost effective, and they offer you a lot more scalability than traditional approaches to building out your data center. Now, just to give you some context of where you might stand among your peers, Unitrends hosted a survey last year on the state of business continuity and disaster recovery. We had more than 750 respondents across 43 countries from more than a dozen industry verticals, and we asked them a series of multiple choice questions. Now, keep in mind that this survey was open to the IT community at large. These weren't just Unitrends users. You can actually click on that link down in the bottom corner there, and that should take you to the survey. Now, what we found was about 30% of respondents today are delivering workloads via public cloud. Of those, 53% reported workloads that were categorized as infrastructure as a service, with another 47% categorized as SaaS applications. There were about 32% of organizations that are hosting at least 3/4, 75% of their workloads or more than that from the cloud today. And over the next 2 years, the percentage of organizations that are going to be delivering their workloads entirely from the cloud is expected to increase by 70%. Now, cloud computing is an equalizer. For a lot of smaller businesses, it enables them to compete with larger organizations and provides them with the flexibility to scale workloads to improve operational efficiency, enable hybrid work models, and creating better customer experiences while providing enterprise-level governance and security. Now, with all of that in mind, the cloud and our environments as a whole, whether they are cloud native or hybrid, are not without risk. We talked to a ton of IT professionals, and Greg, I'm glad you appreciate the meme there, that are struggling with a lot of challenges. This shift to these hybrid environments presents a challenge for a lot of folks that we're working with. They're juggling a combination of workloads that exist on premises, those cloud native workloads, SaaS applications, even the data that's being generated on remote endpoints. Our adversaries are well aware of these threat vectors that have been opened up by a hybrid workforce, and we've seen attacks shifting from a lot of these technologically focused attacks to more social engineering attacks that are preying on the weakest link in any security posture, which is to say our end users. Legacy backup and recovery solutions at the same time are in often cases ill-suited for today's hybrid environments. We hear from folks all the time that as their environment evolved, they had to introduce another data protection vendor to cover and protect those new workloads. They've ended up with siloed protection schemes. They're time-consuming to manage. They're rife with interoperability and compatibility issues, and it requires them to juggle multiple vendors, interfaces, processes, and contracts. And when we talk about that approach to licensing and kind of perpetual licensing or an on-premise solution, how many of those vendors are you using today that can adequately future-proof you for where your environment is going? Are they able to convert those perpetual licenses into subscriptions? Are they able to move a license to protect cloud-based workloads as you would on-premise? Do they have the same agility as you're looking to bring into your environment? If you called up your vendor today and you said, I'd like to convert my on-premise licensing to a virtual appliance within Azure, how would that conversation go? At Unitrends, we're bringing more than 3 decades of experience in data protection and disaster recovery to help solve those challenges and more. We've been recognized by Gartner for enterprise backup since 2014 and for our cloud disaster recovery as a service since 2016. With our focus on cloud native today as a part of this Megacast, I'd encourage you to check out the 2 links on the bottom right. They link to our DCIG reports on AWS and Azure Enterprise Cloud Backups. Now, these reports, one's available as a handout as well. They're DCIG's most recent top 5 reports published for Enterprise Cloud Backup. In 2021, they looked at hybrid cloud, SDS block storage, and in 2022, focusing on enterprise backup for VMware. But ultimately, as we look at addressing these challenges in the marketplace, what we're looking to do is reducing a lot of that complexity in your environment. Your environment might be complicated, but we feel that protecting it shouldn't be. You need to be able to protect everything in your evolving data center and in the cloud, as well as some of these new sources of data, SaaS applications and endpoints that are being run by your remote workforce. Our goal at Unitrends is to enable organizations with a turnkey, purpose-built backup and recovery platform to protect physical and virtual systems, cloud workloads, and those applications. For organizations with hybrid environments, you're able to manage all of your deployments from a single interface. And that appliance, whether physical or virtual, and you deploy a virtual appliance to protect these cloud-native workloads, converges a lot of those supplemental capabilities that are add-ons with other vendors. We're talking about things like deduplication of data, compression, encryption, your ability to perform recovery testing, enterprise reporting, even your replication. We're doing all of that without the needs for add-ons and proxies. Your source appliance might replicate to a secondary recovery target, such as another Unitrends appliance or our dedicated cloud service to protect that data and maintain continuity in the face of site-level disasters such as extreme weather, system failures, or a cyber attack. So let's take a look at how we're building out that platform. And I see some great questions coming in, so I would encourage everyone to keep submitting those questions as they pop up. We've got some time at the end to address those. When we're building our platform from kind of the ground up, it starts with different approaches to be able to protect all of those workloads and gives you the agility to recover how and where you need. So we've got different approaches: cloud native through our virtual appliance, cloud-to-cloud backup for SaaS applications, direct-to-cloud for endpoints, traditional appliances that can sit in your on-premise data center if you still have that footprint locally or have something of a hybrid environment. With regards to recovery, we want to give you the ability to kind of push that DIY reset button and recover how and where you need, whether that's on-premise, within another instance in the public cloud. We're going to explore that in a little bit, or even in the Unitrends cloud, where we offer a white glove service through our DRAS, or our disaster recovery as a service. But to optimize IT efficiency, save you time, and bring more value into backups that are traditionally, not your favorite part, I would imagine, of your environment. Nobody likes babysitting backups. We're starting to inject automation and artificial intelligence to streamline workflows and simplify some of these more complex tasks. That includes our automated DR testing, where we're executing application recovery testing in an isolated environment or a sandbox to certify workloads and recovery point and recovery time actuals. For managing these different approaches through a single pane of glass, we've got an intelligent alerting engine that enables you to customize and prioritize your different alerts to ensure that the SLAs on your protected assets are being met. It enables you to drive that productivity by cutting through a lot of that noise, all those different alarms and flashing lights that you might see, to drill down and address any conditions that would threaten those SLAs. Things like skips or failed backups are going to be prioritized, so you can drill down into those immediately. And a little bit of a newer use case for us, and our customers love this. If folks are familiar with our merger acquisition with Kaseya, we merged in 2019, and since then, more than 30% of our R&D has been put towards building deep, purposeful workflow integration across our suites of products, from remote monitoring and management, IT documentation, security, backup, and recovery. This is one such example and kind of a use case that's been born from those efforts. We've got a SaaS-powered auto remediation platform, that's called Helix, and it's looking for and solving errors in production before they can impact backups. Ultimately, we've wrapped all of this up and give you one centralized platform called the UniView with which to be able to manage all of these different approaches to backup. Now, ransomware is a capability that ransomware protection, I should say, is a capability that I wanted to explore in a little bit more detail. Ransomware attacks are opportunistic in nature. They indiscriminately affect any accessible networks, whether through human and or machine vectors. At Unitrends specifically, we've seen a 20x increase in ransomware-related support tickets in the last 6 months compared to the prior 18. It's an absolutely rampant problem. Now, securing systems and data in the public cloud, such as running instances in AWS or Azure, is a shared responsibility. When you deploy a system in the AWS cloud, for example, AWS is sharing the security responsibilities with you. They're engineering the underlying cloud infrastructure, applying their secure design principles, and you can implement your own security architecture for those workloads that you've deployed. They protect the infrastructure that's running all of the services that they're offering on the cloud, but the data itself is the responsibility of the customer. Depending on the service that you are leveraging within AWS, there's going to be a certain amount of configuration work that you must perform as part of your security responsibilities. You're going to be managing the data, including your encryption options, classifying and tiering your assets, using their identity access management to apply appropriate permissions, setting firewall rules, and other such responsibilities. Anywhere you go, shared responsibility model, AWS, Azure, they're clearly stating that the responsibility of the data or the protection of the data is your responsibility. we've undergone significant and continuous efforts to deliver a hardened backup infrastructure through a combination of protective measures. It starts with immutability and our recovery assurance. We talked a little bit about that testing, but with the Unitrends Cloud, we're storing data in an immutable format. No object, no source appliance can modify, write, encrypt, or otherwise change or delete data that's been written to the Unitrends Cloud. So when you're thinking about that replication strategy, the Unitrends Cloud provides that redundancy from cloud-level downtime in a SOC 2 Type 2 compliant data center with that immutable storage. We're also driving that recovery assurance to certify that the underlying workloads and applications are recoverable and performing as expected. We've built into our platform artificial intelligence, AI-based ransomware detection, where we're using machine learning to establish baseline patterns of behavior against a number of heuristics. Now, we're not simply looking at change rates, but we're also studying the entropy or the randomness of those file changes to identify anomalies and behaviors that are symptomatic of a ransomware infection. And all of our appliances are written in Linux, so we can, or the appliances lie outside of that Windows attack surface, kind of camouflaging backups from what might be kind of a homogeneous production environment. And we've got some additional tools that are built in for that user protection to be a little bit more proactive, phishing defense and credentials monitoring through the dark web. These are integrated into our SaaS backup solution, and I just had a question come in about that, and we're going to be talking a little bit about our SaaS backup. But SaaS is a newer or an emerging threat vector. Our Unitrends MSP arms, working with our MSP community, conducted a similar survey on the state of ransomware, and their findings revealed that MSPs have seen an increasing number of attacks against SaaS platforms, the dominant one being Microsoft 365, but Google Workspace and Dropbox, among others, were mentioned there as well. So we're taking a multi-pronged approach to protect backups by providing redundancy and immutable storage, that automated testing, early warning system, and the ability to prevent the attack through hardened Linux appliances that lie outside of the Windows attack surface, and arming your users with some of that phishing defense and credentials monitoring and exposure monitoring to help secure potential accounts at risk. And we're going to explore those deeper in a little bit. Now, I mentioned Helix, and just imagine here that instead of coming into an inbox that's full of backup failures, you're spending now your Monday morning getting multiple vendors on the phone to try and troubleshoot an issue. Instead, you come into a simple email from Helix. It looks like something on this screenshot, and I apologize, that text is a little bit small. But what it's telling you is that Helix notified or found an error in the environment. It's constantly looking for opportunities to remediate issues. It could be a VSS writer, for example, in a failed state. Now, Helix has gone in and solved that issue, run through its script, and remediated before the backup had an opportunity to fail. In other words, it's ensuring that the success criteria of the environment is being met before backups ever run. You've got good, clean backups and a consistent environment. Our customers have even contacted our support to notify them that they found ransomware because of Helix. What was assumed to be a healthy client had repeated errors. The same services were failing day after day. They keep getting the notices. They say, just something doesn't seem right here. We want to take a look at this. They go to investigate a little bit further, and they found early stages of ransomware through Helix because it was attempting to disable those Windows services. Helix was catching it and attempting to turn them back on. Now, the last piece, the ability to eliminate the unknown, and we've gotten some questions in about our recovery assurance. This is our ability to orchestrate your DR runbook testing down to the application and services level, either for a single machine to verify it, or you might need to test an n-tiered application and verify multiple machines in concert. Now, recovery assurance grants enterprises the flexibility to regularly test and verify that you can successfully recover from your backups. Now, for cloud users, we're able to conduct these recovery tests in Unitrends Cloud rather than AWS or Azure for a couple of reasons. Conducting this testing in the Unitrends Cloud helps to mitigate the additional costs of compute and storage and the configuration overheads that performing these tasks in the public cloud would incur. It also gives enterprises confidence that you can recover outside of the public cloud should it become available. And while, not as common as they might be, these events do occur. I mean, just last month in December, AWS suffered 3 major outages. So when you've got a single glitch in a high-profile provider, that could have huge implications on a number of different organizations and in a lot of cases in unexpected ways. Service interruptions are vast. They're impacting thousands of companies, millions of users. So the Unitrends Cloud, beyond certifying those workloads and that recoverability, enables you to have that redundancy outside of relying strictly on AWS or Azure infrastructure to enable you to maintain the continuity of your protected workloads. Now, to get there, to kind of take a step back, we're going to be leveraging Unitrend's backup software, which is a prepackaged virtual appliance that you will deploy or you can deploy through the AWS or the Azure Marketplace as a virtual machine to protect those cloud-based workloads. Now, locating Unitrend's backup deployment in a different data center within the public cloud protects data and workloads from those cloud-level downtime incidents. And an integrated solution provides redundancy to your cloud platform, delivering you the retention and the recovery capabilities to strengthen that business continuity for those cloud workloads. For AWS, we leverage Unitrend's backup appliance technology as a deployable instance within Amazon's Elastic Compute Cloud, or EC2. That EC2-based AMI can be used as either a backup appliance or a backup copy target, and conversely in Azure, we're going to deploy as an Azure-based VM. So let's look a little bit more at that AWS example. Now, you'll go in and opt to deploy AWS from the deploy Unitrends, from the AWS Marketplace, and you'll provision out that instance with the minimum resource requirements: 2 vCPU, 8 gigs of RAM, 100 gigs for the root volume, and you'll attach an EBS volume, a minimum of 250 gigs, which you can expand as your needs dictate. Now, our documentation and or our support team will help you through with creating the SSM IAM role, the virtual firewall, security groups, and help you launch that AMI to run Unitrend's backup. From there, you'll access our appliance UI from any machine on the same network from a Chrome or Firefox browser. We've got a quick setup wizard that'll take you through the final steps to set up that appliance, set your root and OS user passwords, and from there, you can start protecting your AWS instances with a combination of file level or application level agent-based backups. Now, from that singular UI, you can also manage your replication, where you may choose to replicate data to the Unitrends cloud, which we've talked about, or another Unitrends backup appliance that's been deployed within the same subnet within AWS to create some of that in-cloud redundancy. Now, as far as the Unitrends cloud options, we operate as a cloud service provider that specializes in backup and disaster recovery to provide business continuity for those cloud workloads. Unlike a general purpose cloud service that's providing kind of every service carte blanche under the sun, we're focused on delivering turnkey backup and DR services as our primary competency. If there's a cloud level downtime event or a site-wide event that impacts your users and their ability to connect, or some other disaster, our Cloud Cores team is going to serve as an extension of your own to deliver the key services that you need to back up and recover applications and data that may exist in the cloud. Now, offering is built with a sole focus on delivering that cloud backup and recovery. We provide you with a geographically dispersed cloud configuration. There's minimal to no management on your part for your staff because our offering is turnkey. There are no variable or unexpected per incident charges. And our goal, by augmenting our staff or augmenting your staff with our Cloud Cores team, for a lot of smaller organizations, we've mitigated that need to develop backup and DR as an internal core IT competency. When you think about a disaster and the reality of business continuity versus DR in a disaster event, a lot of IT teams are focused on disaster recovery. They want to bring the systems online, but business continuity is an organization-wide problem. And again, in those incidents of a site incident, it could be risky. You might not be able to get to that primary site, and that's where failover into the Unitrends cloud can come over and help. Now, we license things a little bit differently than the public cloud providers because we've tuned our cloud specifically for long-term data retention and that disaster recovery as a service. So you can set the specified retention period for the subset of data, and you know upfront over the duration of that data exactly what it's going to cost. Your cheapest day in the public cloud is day one. So for a lot of organizations like medical institutions or state and local government, perhaps, where you need longer retention requirements as part of industry compliance standards, do you want to have to account for 7+ years of retention in the public cloud? It's going to get awfully expensive as that continues to accumulate. So we offer a more predictable way to be able to manage that. Now, for the DR piece, it's a true white glove service. Our disaster recovery, if we're receiving those backups from AWS or on-premise, wherever you're replicating to, into the Unitrends cloud, we are going to build out your DR plan and your DR runbook in the cloud. It's not a handoff or outsourced. It's a customized white glove approach. So once we're receiving that data, and you're storing it in the Unitrends cloud, where, again, that data is immutable. We're executing tests against that to ensure the recoverability. We're also walking through you to build in that DR runbook. What are the boot order of these machines? What are the networking configurations? What do you need in terms of potentially public-facing IPs to be able to host a website? How are we going to reroute your users? What order are we bringing on those applications? All of those different things as part of the failover are being documented as part of the runbook. So once there's a disaster, you make a phone call to Unitrends, and we go through and execute that DR runbook to spin you up and run invisibly in our cloud. We help you reroute user traffic through an SSL VPN where they can now access the workloads out of our data center, and especially for hybrid environments or where that on-premise environment may exist. Again, when we think about the costs and running production in the public cloud, it can get expensive. So if you fail over into the public cloud with the supply chain issues today, how long are you going to be running there as though that meter is running before you can fail back, before you can get that replacement hardware, before you can get all of that set up and configured? We're hearing lead times on servers of 30 to 45 days. And if that unexpected downtime is prolonged, that can be really expensive, whereas with the Unitrends DRAS, for the runtime period exactly what to expect in terms of that charge. It's all being provisioned accordingly ahead of time in the event of a disaster, so we're prepared for that. Now, we'll help you through with the failback options as well. And I do see that I'm coming up close on time, so I'll move quickly here, Scott. The other piece, and I saw some questions here, the last piece that I wanted to touch on is spanning. It's our cloud-to-cloud backup solution for SaaS applications such as Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, and Salesforce. We've got to update our materials here, so I apologize. This is a cloud-to-cloud backup service. They've completed the SSA 16 SOC 2 Type 2 compliance audit. It's a HIPAA-compliant solution as well. Easy to use. You can manage it from any device. Spanning automatically provisions snapshots to be taken once per day of the protected SaaS environment. You can run those backups on demand. Now, recovery is entirely self-service if you choose. You can limit that to admins, but you could have end users restoring things into their old mailbox versus having to submit a ticket and wait for that request, for example. Because the restores are non-destructive. You can recover a file, a folder, a mailbox as required to the same user or any user on your tenant using cross-restore functionality, which is great when someone's leaving the organization. You can recover their data to a shared mailbox or to another user before deactivating the account. It's entirely cloud-based, so there's no local storage or appliance to manage. Easy to install and configure. Users can be up and running protecting Microsoft 365, for example, in literally minutes. They've got a quick start video on the website. I think it's 5 minutes to get up and running. We're going to access your tenant through OAuth 2.0, which is more secure than creating a service account with elevated privileges, and that ends up being another account with the potential that could be compromised. Once you grant that authorization, you start assigning licenses out to your users via the UI or Spanning's APIs to further automate that process, and we're going to provide and manage all of that storage on the back end. So you've got unlimited retention, unlimited storage with data that's protected at rest with 256-bit AES object level encryption. All data in transit is also protected with SSL encryption. Now, two important integrations from a security perspective to augment the backup and recovery capabilities here are our phishing defense and our credentials exposure monitoring. We're monitoring the dark web for exposed credentials, and it's integrated directly into the Spanning UI. So there's not another portal or user interface that you need to go through. It's simply a tab that's added into your user interface here, just another kind of module within that. And this alerts administrators to compromised or stolen employee credentials. It enables you to take proactive steps to secure accounts before malicious activity occurs. You can see in our example here, we've had some password hits where passwords are revealed. You can take action to secure that account and open up that conversation about good cyber hygiene with the employee. This service is pre-configured. Intuitive user controls are integrated directly within the Spanning backup and activated on your 365 tenant. So it's designed to provide you with an experience as an administrator near identical to what you're already running and familiar with in Microsoft 365. The other piece is the phishing defense. We know that email is a primary target for hacking and fraud. Weak or stolen credentials are the number one hacking technique. And when you think about your 365 credentials, they do a lot more than just give a threat actor access to an email account. It's securing all of your users' 365 application and services. So this automated phishing defense as part of the security stack enables employees to immediately defend from email-based cyber attacks like phishing, spear phishing, business email compromise. We employ a patented AI technology that monitors all communication patterns between people people, devices, and networks to reveal untrustworthy emails. So we're focusing on the credibility of each interaction to identify and block social engineering attacks that are targeting employees to keep your organization safe. They're also enabled to take action in the defense. You see kind of that purple warning banner. They get a suspicious email where the domain doesn't line up with the sender alias or there's an untrusted attachment. If that looks like a phishing attack, they can report that. We'll automatically be quarantined out of their inbox as well as any other user that may have received that email if they're attempting a mass send attack to get anyone to click. That will be quarantined for all recipients until IT has the opportunity to investigate and either take action if it is a malicious email or release it safely back into the inbox if it is deemed that is legitimate and safe. So ultimately, what we're trying to drive at when we look at those problems that we talked about earlier, how do you go from being complete and unified? It starts for us with being able to protect data in all of these different locations, in clouds, remote devices. It's not just in the backup side of things. As we're expanding into account takeover protection, that phishing defense, that human protection, being able to do all of that in one place with one user through single sign-on, one call to support it all, we feel that that's a big part of the simplicity of being complete. With regards to automation and the way that people are attacking things in environments today, they want backups to fail. There are aspects out of control of the backup vendor that everyone is immune to. That VSS example that we had talked about earlier, in a Windows environment. But as we're bringing more of our automation into the infrastructure use case, that's another way that we're starting to differentiate, we feel, ensuring that users have good backups, reliable backups. We're doing that today. It's living in production. That's the Unitrends Helix. And pricing things right, it's not just about that initial price tag, but is it flexible and predictable? We talked a little bit about how Unitrends Cloud is based on capacity and retention versus kind of a running meter. So up front, that if I need a raw footprint of 1 terabyte retained for 7 years, what that's going to look like. But is there the opportunity to, as we had talked about earlier as well, as you're shifting from one approach to the next, as on-premise data is moving into the cloud or into M365, for example, you've got the ability with Unitrends to future-proof that, converting an on-premise license into a subscription for a license that you want to run out of the cloud. There's more to come here. We're still working on some things, but we're very, very excited. Scott, before I turn it over to you and the Q&A, if we do have time for questions, I know I went a few minutes over. I would encourage everyone to check out unitrends.com for more information. Scott's going to be posting a poll here briefly, so if you'd like more information, you'd like to see in action a little bit what we talked about with a demonstration, just indicate on that poll question. You can email us at info@unitrends.com to get started.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, Adam. A lot of information there. Fantastic presentation. Info@unitrends.com is the URL there. As promised, I am going to push our poll just about what additional information you'd like about the Unitrends solution. And we did have a ton of questions come in, Adam, but let's get to a couple of them. First one from Jeffrey: is there an appliance-less offering like desktop direct-to-cloud backup?
So we can, Jeffrey. What I would recommend is to visit unitrends.com and check out under our products tab. You should see Unitrends Endpoint Backup. So it's direct to cloud technology. We've hardened and enhanced some of our file level agents to support reliable WAN-based backup. So you can deploy that agent onto a remote laptop or a device that's paired with an instance in the Unitrends cloud, so you don't have to worry about provisioning out storage or managing that cloud environment. We're taking care of all of that on the back end for you. But you can manage that through a web-based portal and restore onto the original device, or if you needed to restore that back down, restore files of the entire machine back onto another device. You'd be able to do so. So that's Unitrends Endpoint Protection.
Okay, super. Another question here from David. He's wondering if Helix can be used. Questions are coming in fast, and it just shifted off my screen. If Helix can be used for on-prem and cloud backups.
So Helix runs out of the cloud. So Helix is entirely SaaS based. You can absolutely use it for your on-premise deployment. I will have to double check and follow up to ensure that we can run that and monitor machines that are in AWS. Because it is SaaS-based, I'm leaning yes, but I would want to verify that. So I will look into that and we will follow up to confirm.
Okay, super. Well, Adam, I hate to do this, but we're running out of time. So, maybe if you have a few minutes and you can hang out in the online chat and get to some of these questions, because a lot of people have questions for you.
That sounds great, Scott. And thanks again, everyone, for the questions. We appreciate it. I'll try and answer what I can, and if not, we'll be sure to follow up with you as well.
Excellent. Well, Adam, thanks for bringing us up to speed on Unitrends, and really appreciate having you on.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
So we do have our next prize drawing, and this is for the $500 Amazon gift card, and this one goes to. Okay, our $500 gift card goes to Christy Bunn from Pennsylvania. And our next phone goes to Chris Becerra from Minnesota. So congratulations to Christy and Chris. We will be in touch with details for getting your prizes. And now it's time for our next presentation. And our next session comes from Kasten by Veeam and Nutanix. So presenting for Kasten by Veeam is Adam Berg, Global Alliance Architect, and representing Nutanix is Sean Roth, Director of Product Marketing. And now I will turn things over to Adam.
My name is Adam Berg with Kasten by Veeam. I run cloud native technical partnerships here at Kasten, and I'm joined with Sean from Nutanix. Hi, Sean.
Hey, Adam, great to be here. Thanks for having me on. So I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Nutanix for Virtualized and Cloud Native Compute. So today we're going to tackle the topic of how to simplify Kubernetes operations with Nutanix and Kasten. Let's get right into it.
Thanks, Sean. I really want to start here, though, before we sort of deep dive into the topic that we're in today. I want to kind of take us on a little journey of where we've been and where we're going in this space. Now, if you, many of you are, if you're old like me and Sean here, we remember the days where servers in the data center were these big monolithic machines. They ran one operating system, they ran one application. And when you needed to scale that application, you had to procure new hardware. That took months to, just to get that machine into your data center, to get that application stood up. Man, I do not miss those days. And
it's amazing how anything got done at that time in retrospect.
I know, and it was amazing that we had this huge inflection point, and it's really changed the course of what was happening in our data center. And this was the idea of the hypervisor, the ability to run multiple operating systems on top of a single piece of hardware. And this really changed how we sort of ran applications, how we scaled applications, how we deployed applications in the data center. We no longer had to, call up a hardware vendor and order new hardware when we just needed another application spun up. We're able to clone a virtual machine or scale these virtual machines, and it really changed how we deployed, how we managed our businesses, and it really delivered new capabilities and new services to the business. And this was incredible for most organizations, but it led to another problem, and that was virtualization management. And VMware really, they didn't invent virtualization, but they really brought this idea and the concept of how we manage virtualization, how we manage VMs with vSphere and vCenter, and they really became the de facto leader in virtualization because they brought the best management tool to the industry. The problem with virtualization is because we were able to now clone and spin up virtualization through vCenter, and we had another problem called VM sprawl, right? And with VM sprawl, that means we're cloning all of these Windows operating systems, all of these Linux operating systems, when I really just needed another application. I didn't need another operating system. I mean, with all the security implications, was that operating system patched? And now I've got hundreds of these Windows machines out there, and any one of them could have a security flaw in them when I really just needed the application to be cloned. And that's where the idea of containers were really born. And the idea of a container is I'm decoupling the application from the host operating system, and I'm just taking the bits of the application that I really care about, and I'm able to clone just that without needing to, say, spin up another Linux host to run that application on. And it was really, the start of a new sort of shift in the way that we think about application development, application scalability, and the way that developers are now creating new applications for organizations. Just like VMware sort of brought virtualization to the masses, Docker did the same way with containers. They didn't invent the container, but they sort of popularized that. They brought containers to the masses. Of course, just like virtualization and VMware, we've got this problem of container sprawl now, and we needed something to orchestrate that. Kubernetes now is sort of the winner in this space. It's the de facto orchestration tool for deploying containers to scaling containerized applications. And that's really what we're here to talk about today, is the rise of Kubernetes. And where many of you are at in the audience, you're probably thinking about, where do I start? Let's look at what the analysts are saying here, though, a little bit. They're saying 500 million new apps will be deployed on top of containerized platforms by 2024. By 2025, 75% of enterprises are saying that they're going to be running containerized applications. And most organizations are realizing that legacy data protection tool and data management tools that maybe worked really well in their legacy infrastructure are not appropriate for cloud native based applications, containerized applications, and they're looking at new tooling and new ways to manage their data.
Yeah, Adam, these are some great trends to point out. And I think, when you peel those back, what's also interesting is that when you look at the rise of containerized applications and how they're deployed in the enterprise, not only are the majority of enterprises running applications in containers here, but they're also more and more these days are doing so in production. And of course, production applications require all kinds of attention toward HA. And of course, the early days of containers meant that it was really easy to containerize a stateless application where you didn't really have to worry about the application state or its data. But fast forward to today, you find the majority of containerized applications really do require data management, storage and backup in DR and so forth. So that's I think perennially been one of the biggest problems to solve around building a Kubernetes environment and managing it.
Yeah, that really takes us to the conversation that we have with a lot of organizations that are starting to dip their toe into Kubernetes. It's, where do I start? It's that day zero challenge that most organizations are thinking about. So day zero is really that design phase. They're thinking about, do I build my own Kubernetes deployment? Do I work with a public cloud provider? Which Kubernetes distribution do I choose? What about storage? What about network layer, load balancers? What about security, logging, and monitoring? All these things that we've sort of figured out through the years of traditional infrastructure or virtualized infrastructure. All of that has changed, right? The skill sets that my team have from managing my legacy infrastructure, my traditional infrastructure, are potentially different than the skill sets needed for containerized applications and Kubernetes. These are some of the biggest challenges most organizations are thinking about when they're at that day zero part of their journey. Isn't that right, Sean?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you pointed out, Adam, I mean, there's just so many different aspects of a Kubernetes environment to focus on and to configure. Plus, there's a crippling amount of choice out there. If you look across the CNCF ecosystem, the whole set of technologies that revolve around Kubernetes. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of open source solutions and commercially available technologies as well. How do you go about choosing what's right for your environment? I suppose, if you have a degree of experience working with Kubernetes and understand it well enough to match that up with where your organization is headed, that's one thing. But in a lot of ways, I think simplifying the day-to-day operations of Kubernetes, in addition to building the stack itself, I mean, are really key. As we kind of make our way toward the mainstream of container adoption.
That's really where Nutanix can help. Is that correct?
And that's right. If you are familiar with Nutanix, you know that we pioneered hyper-converged infrastructure, and we've really built our reputation on creating infrastructure that's incredibly simple to use and manage. And so we think we're an ideal infrastructure for Kubernetes in the way that we can meet kind of the scalability and resource consumption demands of a large-scale distributed environment like Kubernetes. And so we come in with HCI, which is very easy to deploy and manage. We bring in a whole host of full-featured data services that you can connect to your Kubernetes clusters via our CSI. We have our own virtualization layer, as well as a Kubernetes management solution called Carbon. So if you happen to be, in the formative stages of your cloud native journey, and you're looking to really get those day zero, those day zero objectives met, you can do so with an infrastructure solution like Nutanix HCI with these components that you put into place, and it's absolutely ready for you to deploy a Kubernetes cluster using the distribution of your choice.
It sounds like Nutanix is one of the premier partners for that, answering some of those day zero Kubernetes challenges I'm hearing.
Definitely, and there are quite a few of them from what we hear from our customers. So, the more we can simplify all of that, the better.
All right, so we've got some day zero answers from Nutanix. Let's talk about day one. Now, what do we mean by day one, right? Day one is I've rolled out my infrastructure. I'm starting to get my Kubernetes ramped up. I'm starting to get my developers in play. We're starting to go pre-production, maybe starting to do my some initial DevOps operations on my infrastructure. But now I'm worried about other things. I'm worried about not being able to deliver to the business fast enough. I'm worried about security. I'm worried about compliance. I'm worried about sensitive and regulated workloads. I'm worried about managing this infrastructure, Kubernetes versions, security rollout. All of these other things that sort of prevent us from going into production are a lot of these day one challenges that organizations need to be thinking about, even prior to their rollout. Some of these day one challenges need to be thought about during the day zero, right, Sean?
Absolutely. It doesn't stop when you build the environment. Now you've basically got to ensure everything works together and start to deploy your applications. And that, of course, means having met some of the security requirements, and obviously, some types of organizations are subject to more stringent controls as dictated by regulatory compliance. Getting the storage and data management for your applications all set, and that's really where Kasten comes in. We've seen some great synergies amongst a few customers between Nutanix and Kasten.
Yeah, and so where we sort of start thinking about the business is that day two, right? And day two challenges are, all right, I'm going to production. I need to start thinking about how do I deliver data availability to the business? How do I deliver seamless backup and recovery, data mobility across clusters? Disaster recovery is something that needs to be delivered as part of day two operations. How do I manage SLAs and on-demand scalability, data governance, right? Day two operational challenges are also tasks that are critical to the business and prevent a lot of organizations from taking the idea of Kubernetes going to day one and actually getting into production, going to day two. They're still trying to scratch their head figuring out, okay, how do I deliver data availability and guarantee the data protection of the most important business asset that our company has, which is the data being produced inside of containerized applications. And unfortunately, Kasten is here to help solve a lot of those day two challenges. And with our core mission statement here on what we're doing. And Kasten is really all about tackling those really difficult day two data management challenges, backup and recovery, application mobility, and disaster recovery. We're there to protect all of that key critical data being produced inside of Kubernetes, inside of those containerized applications, guaranteeing the availability of that data with best of breed data availability solutions. Most organizations aren't just rolling out a single Kubernetes cluster. Again, this is sort of a bit of a fragmented environment still with different Kubernetes distributions, different Kubernetes versions supporting different APIs, right? You need to be the ability to have a tool that can move applications between clusters. You have a dev test cluster and a production cluster. How do you move applications between those clusters? Application mobility is a key day two operational challenge that Kasten K10 solves for you. And of course, disaster recovery, still something that we deal with even in this new paradigm of containerized applications. I need to be able to fail over clusters, keep my business up and running, guarantee the availability of my business operations through full disaster recovery, which Kasten K10 also delivers. So in short, Kasten K10 from Veeam is the #1 Kubernetes data protection tool in the market today. We're built for Kubernetes, purpose-built for this new cloud-native architectural principles, meaning we run right within the Kubernetes cluster itself. We're embedded into native Kubernetes APIs. We've got built-in end-to-end security, supporting not only authentication principles, but also things like immutable data repositories, support for robust role-based access controls in multiple different authentication mechanisms. The rich ecosystem that we're talking about today with our integrations into the Nutanix platform, with integrations into their native CSI storage platform and support for the multiple different Kubernetes distributions that run on top of the Nutanix hyperconverged platform. And of course, it's got to be easy to use, right? What's really slowing down operational availability of Kubernetes today and sort of customers moving into that day 2 spaces, some of them feel like this stuff is hard, right? Nutanix and Kasten are delivering state-of-the-art UIs, right? Not everybody can do everything from a CLI or through an API, but we're delivering API and programmability aspects as well, but we're easy to install and we're completely extensible. And what I always say is seeing is believing. Let's jump right into a demo and take a look at how we can install the Carbon Kubernetes platform on top of Nutanix and then install and protect data applications with Kasten K10 by Veeam. And welcome to this demo of protecting Nutanix Carbon with Kasten K10 by Veeam. Installing Nutanix Carbon is a simple wizard in the Prism Central UI interface. The UI interface allows us to do simple naming of clusters, selecting of Kubernetes versions, and selecting host OS. Select your network resource options, select the number of worker nodes, CPU and memory resources, and click Next. Select your network provider and storage class options. Setting up a Nutanix Carbon cluster is as simple as that. Installing Kasten K10 by Veeam is a simple Helm chart. You can find additional Helm info on installing Kasten K10 at docs.kasten.io. Creating the namespace and running the Helm chart installs Kasten K10. Once Kasten K10 is up and operational, we're here in the UI interface. As you can see, it's a nice HTML5 interface. Kasten K10 automatically discovers all applications installed within the Nutanix Carbon cluster. Let's install a simple WordPress application using a Helm chart. As you can see, the WordPress application is automatically discovered by Kasten K10. You can see all the components of the application, including 2 persistent volume claims. The first step in Kasten K10 is adding a repository for backup location. We'll use a S3 storage that can easily be Nutanix objects. Once your location profile is created, let's create a backup policy for WordPress. Select your snapshot frequency, the snapshot retention, and enable backup exports. Select your location profile. In this case, we'll use Nutanix Object S3 compatible storage. Let's select our application by application name. We'll select all resources to protect, and we'll create policy. Our policy details can now be seen here. Let's run this policy now. Back on our dashboard, we can see the progress of our ongoing backup. In the activity window, you can see the action, and clicking on this action shows the status of the current backup action. And our backup is complete. And now our WordPress application is compliant with our backup policy. Let's uninstall our WordPress application so we can test a restore. We use the helm uninstall command to remove the application. Our application is now removed from Kasten K10. To do a recovery, we'll filter by status and choose Removed Applications. This allows us to choose a restore point to restore the application. Choose your restore point and click Restore. We can track the progress of the restore action on the dashboard. Restore is now in progress, and if we click the action, we can see the progress of the restore. The restore is complete, and now you can see our WordPress application has been returned to the dashboard. Let's run a simple kubectl get namespace and kubectl get pods to confirm that the application is now up and running. And it is. That's recovering an application with Kasten K10 on Nutanix Carbon. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that demo as much as we did. Let's get into final thoughts here, Sean. It's all about taming operational complexity with Nutanix and Kasten. Is that right?
Yeah, and that is definitely a big undertaking. As you think through what you're going to need in getting through your day 0, your day 1, and your day 2 objectives, a lot of times you want to start off small and start off with proven solutions that have well integrated components. So from the infrastructure all the way up to your Kubernetes management solution and beyond. Start off with fewer components, get the critical objectives met, meaning you've got storage configured, you have a backup and DR process in place, you've thought through some of the security controls that you're going to need to operate, and there are several more. But again, this is what's going to ensure a smoother journey. When you look to solutions, see how much of the very manual kind of detail-oriented processes can be handled with turnkey approaches and solutions.
So I want to send you here, a lot of you are still on your journey to learning about Kubernetes. This is something that Kasten wants to give back to the community. It's learning.kasten.io, free online Kubernetes training for you. We offer free certification and badges. This is not just learning about Kasten or watching some YouTube videos. This is live, interactive, real Kubernetes clusters that will take you through your journey of learning Kubernetes, from installing your first cluster to installing your first applications to learning about Kubernetes-based storage, to learning about data protection in day 2 operations in Kubernetes. So I encourage you to check out learning.kasten.io and take the first steps towards your Kubernetes learning journey.
These are great tools that are available from Kasten. We have some similar information and an experience that we call Test Drive at Nutanix. So if you would like to see how Nutanix Carbon can simplify Kubernetes for you in configuring and deploying a Kubernetes cluster in less than 20 minutes, we go through a lot of that and more of a hands-on type experience. So please do check that out if you have a chance at nutanix.com/testdrive.
And with that, we'll take some questions. So thank you very much, Sean. And thank you everyone for being on today's webinar.
Okay, great. So learning.caston.io and Nutanix.com/test drive. I'm also putting up the poll question here. Just any additional information you'd like about the Caston and Nutanix solution. But Sean and Adam, great discussion. Nice demo. Are you guys ready for some questions?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, super. So there's a best practices question from Ned, and it gets to, what are the unique concerns for backup and recovery when it comes to a Kubernetes environment?
Yeah, I mean, what you really need to be thinking about is that it's essential, right? I think everyone needs to go into the Kubernetes journey, when they're thinking, when they're at that day zero stage, thinking about what am I going to do for backup and recovery. But not only that, full disaster recovery is essential. And then you also want to be thinking about, this is probably not the only cluster I'm going to be deploying applications to. I'm probably going to be eventually moving these applications potentially to a different provider or a different cloud or a different Kubernetes distribution. You want to be thinking about having a tool that's also can do what we call application mobility and moving an entire application, transforming that application so that it can land on different Kubernetes distributions, different underlying infrastructure. All of those things are sort of variables when it comes to Kubernetes. So you want to be thinking about having a tool that's in place that can handle all that. And of course, ransomware, insider threats, malware, that's also something that you should be concerned about. Make sure that your tools, your data protection tools have that in mind and can create fully immutable, encrypted copies of your data that are untouchable by not only external threats, the traditional malware, hackers, ransomware, but also potentially insider threats or even accidental deletion, right? Caston K10 has all of those cases covered. So definitely have a look and be thinking about those use cases.
Okay, super. And that actually answered another question from David about how to protect against malicious open source code, I think. But it's sort of a good segue into another question here. They're asking, what different Kubernetes distributions run on top of the Nutanix hyperconverged platform?
Sure. Yeah, it seems to be a popular question as it came up in the chat a few times. Pretty much any distribution you prefer. I mean, we understand from pretty much all of our customers that we speak with, there are very specific preferences with regard to Kubernetes distribution. Some are very interested in running the more popular commercial platforms like Red Hat OpenShift and Rancher. We certainly support those. In fact, we have a formal strategic partnership with Red Hat where OpenShift is the preferred Kubernetes platform and DevOps platform for Nutanix HCI. That seems to be a pretty popular one. And there's a commitment to improve the interoperability of those two technologies down the road. So that's a good choice. Incidentally, Nutanix, we offer our own homegrown Kubernetes management solution, which is really great as an integrated part of Nutanix AHV. You can simply get up and running, and if you're just starting out with Kubernetes, you can deploy a production-ready cluster in less than 20 minutes. So it's got a lot of the workflows that you typically would want to use throughout the life cycle. So manage upgrades of Kubernetes version itself, Node OS upgrades, storage configuration, HA, and so forth. So again, just to go back to the original question, it's really up to you. But Nutanix's position is that we want to be the underlying infrastructure for whichever Kubernetes distribution that you want to run.
Okay, super. And we probably have time for one more. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, a little bit more about the Caston integration with Nutanix. What does it mean to be integrated into the Nutanix native CSI storage platform?
Yeah, and I'll take that one real quick, and Sean, jump in if you want. So what's really amazing is that there's native APIs that exist from Nutanix that Caston integrates with and talks with to actually control hardware-based integrated snapshots of our applications when we're doing data protection. So what Caston can do is integrate with that, with those APIs being delivered from Nutanix that integrate directly into their storage, so that when you do data protection, what we're first doing is a hardware-based application snapshot of the data. And from there, that's our first data point. And from there, we can move the data off to a secondary target like object storage or an NFS-based target, such as Nutanix Objects, or pick your favorite public cloud object storage platform. That's how we're protecting the data into multiple locations, giving us ultra-fast recoveries directly from hardware-based snapshots through that integration, but also having those durable external data protection points out in object storage as well.
Okay. Well, Adam and Sean, great presentation today, and thank you so much for bringing us up to speed on the Cast and the Nutanix partnership and in the integrations and some of the unique challenges in Kubernetes-related backup. Really informative stuff.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for having us. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, and I will leave the poll up there for a minute while we go through our next prize drawing. And the winner of the $500 Amazon gift card is Catherine Maroney from California. So congratulations to Catherine. We'll be in touch about claiming your prize. And now it's time for our final presentation in this disaster recovery and data protection megacast. Our next session comes from Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and presenting for HPE is Ken Huffman, Data Protection Solutions Business Manager at HPE. Ken, welcome.
Greetings, everyone. Ken Huffman, I am the Solution Business Manager for data protection products within HPE. That includes Zerto. And we're here to talk about Zerto being a cloud-native data protection platform. So the agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the acquisition of Zerto. HPE did just acquire Zerto. And we'll talk about data protection. That is a term within HPE. I just want to make sure that we understand that term and also talk about data protection products within HPE. Then we'll get into the Zerto, the cloud native platform, and then talk about Zerto and cloud integration. And then we'll wrap up with some Zerto benefits. So first off, the acquisition stuff. This is Zerto at a glance. This was one of the slides in the acquisition deck. And if you look in the top middle, Zerto was founded in 2009. So, most startups, software companies are startups, and they are truly startups and young. Zerto was a pretty mature company when we acquired them. So the product is very mature. They've been doing cloud for years. So, I mean, it is significantly capable with cloud, and we're going to get into that. The other thing I wanted to point out is the logos. So you can see Centura Health, Houston Methodist, HCA. Zerto is really strong in the healthcare industry, and we're going to get into why. And then also top left, United, and then you see Spirit, and what's not on here is Frontier Airlines. Airlines, their reservation systems are critical for their business. They can lose, $1 million an hour is some of the metrics I've seen. And so those airlines run on Zerto because they can't tolerate downtime. So just want to identify that. And then another slide from the acquisition deck was kind of the marquee slide. Zerto, cloud mobility, fastest recovery objectives, and ransomware protection. Those are the three pillars they kind of announced. And then lastly, key opportunities to integrate. So Zerto integrates really well with a lot of the HPE portfolio. Two main points, at least announced at the acquisition, is we're going to integrate it with our data services cloud console. We just launched that late last year. And then Zerto within GreenLake. I think if you're familiar with HPE, you're familiar with GreenLake, and everything is going as a service. So Zerto will be integrated there as well. So getting into data protection, I just wanted to, within HPE, that's the main umbrella term over, managing your data. So it's a category of products and methods that provide the ability to recover data or workloads in the event of a failure or an outage. And then, what are the methods? That's something else to, understand. And so generally it's backup, snapshots, and replication. And you're going to see how Zerto is different in that arena, and it's a replication product. Within HPE, we've got tape drives in the StoreEver portfolio. We've got Store Once, which is a disk-based backup target that has Cloud Bank, so we can push backups off to S3 targets like AWS. Then we've got Zerto. We just acquired them, continuous data protection, and it's that replication bit that we were talking about. And then DSCC, I've mentioned that already, Data Services Cloud Console. It's a cloud console or a marketplace for provisioning, protecting, and managing your infrastructure and data. And then lastly, we've got other smaller products like RMC, which is Recovery Manager Central, and it's essentially a data mover that we have with our arrays. So we'll get into Zerto now. So first off, IT imperatives, cloud, security, compliance, all those things are top of mind, especially cloud, which is what we're here for, right? But along with those imperatives, you can't have downtime. You cannot tolerate downtime. We need 24/7. If I go to a website and I see a spinning, the little spinning icon, and I can't get to, the product I want to buy, I'll go to another website. So it's got to be up all the time, no downtime at all. So the Zerto platform, how does that address that? So first off, cloud data management and protection. So it is a cloud native data management and protection product. And it's based on, if you go to the middle of the screen, continuous data and workload protection. That is the engine behind Zerto. And so if you shorten that, continuous data protection, CDP is the term that you'll hear. And what does that deliver for you? Well, it delivers disaster recovery, continuous backup, long-term, all those colored boxes. Those are all the things that Zerto brings to your operation. And it, on top of that, is orchestration, automation, and analytics. So in one pane of glass, you have the orchestration and automation, all that background stuff that is done for you by Zerto, as well as analytics to understand the condition of your data and your workloads. So that's kind of Zerto at a high level, but where does Zerto work? Zerto, you can see all those icons or the logos at the bottom. So Azure, Google Cloud, AWS, so all of the major clouds Zerto supports. Additionally, if you see the other logos, VMware and Hyper-V, so Zerto supports the two main hypervisors in the market. And then lastly, you see the Kubernetes logos. So Zerto just last year launched Zerto for Kubernetes. And so what Zerto does for a virtualized environment, it now does for containerized environments. So we talked about cloud and Zerto's cloud support. So Zerto is multi-cloud data management strategy, disaster recovery, backup, and workload mobility to, from, and within public cloud. So Zerto enables workloads that might be on-prem at the moment to be moved to AWS or Azure. Zerto, if you move it to Azure, and you're not happy for some reason, you can actually move it to AWS with Zerto very simply, very easily, and we'll get into how that happens. So to understand how that happens, we have to first explain the Zerto difference. This is the key slide for understanding Zerto technology. So starting at the top left, going around the clock, it's continuous replication. That is key. It's not synchronous replication. Synchronous replication is tier 0 kind of stuff, but synchronous replication is also brittle. So if something happens to the replication and your WAN link saturates, it can break. So Zerto is specifically near synchronous replication by design. Moving around the clock, we don't just replicate data. We don't just replicate a VM. We can replicate entire groups of VMs that make up a workload, and we replicate to a journal, not just storage. That journal is a lot like a DVR. So DVRs, if you're watching a television show and you miss a scene, you can rewind and go watch that again. Similar concept with Zerto's journal. They write checkpoints every 5 seconds or so. And if you have a disaster or if you have a file deletion or whatever, you can go back in time as little as 5 seconds and as much as 30 days. It's configurable. To recover a file, you could recover a VM or an entire workload. Rotating around the clock, application consistency. So if you have multiple VMs that make up a workload, how do you recover those VMs? Well, Zerto writes with or protects with write order fidelity. So those 5 or 6 VMs that make up that workload are replicated to the target side with write order fidelity, so that you can recover your entire application stack in a disaster. And then lastly, at the bottom left, I talked about a single pane of glass. All of this is delivered in a single product. There's not different modules you need to buy for Zerto. There's no, multiple licensing models or anything like that. Single interface, single product to deliver all of this. So we haven't talked too much about cloud, but here's the Zerto multi-cloud architecture. This is an example of a production site, might be on-prem, and then on the right side are various clouds. And so the production site has VMs you can see in blue, and then the yellow boxes, there's a ZVM that is Zerto Virtual Manager. It's a VM that runs on the hypervisor. And then there are VRAs. Those are VMs that run on the hypervisor as well, and they replicate the data to a target. And in this case, it's the cloud. So you can replicate from on-prem to Azure, Google, AWS. You could move to, like I said, Azure or AWS and replicate between regions. You can actually move from AWS to Azure if necessary. So Zerto is all about workload mobility, cloud native workload mobility. I want to talk a little bit about the journal that we're writing to in the sense of ransomware. So in this case, disaster hits at 10, and you can rewind 5 seconds prior to that disaster, ransomware deployment, to recover your workload, and again with write order fidelity. Whereas with backups and snapshots, you have different recovery point objectives. It might be 6 hours back in time, it might be 10 hours with backup. And how do you recover that workload? Well, with Zerto replicating the VMs that make up a workload, you've got this ability to recover 5 seconds ago or up to 30 days ago. And we're talking cloud here. So you can do this in the cloud. Cloud integration points. So Zerto Data Protection is a version of Zerto that is much less expensive, and it's meant just for backups. And what it does is it replicates locally, and then you can push those backups off to some other target. So if you look at LTR to disks, that's long-term retention. Store once is a great target via our Catalyst API. You can do Primera and Nimble, which are just block storage devices, or you can go to a purpose-built appliance. But we can also push those off to cloud. So you can see the Azure, AWS, Google Cloud symbols. So Zerto can push backups off to clouds. And then I just brought up Cloud Volumes Backup. So that is our cloud-based backup repository that is HPE gear. It's really based on Nimble. So Zerto can not only move workloads between clouds, to and from clouds, we can also back up data to the cloud, especially Cloud Volumes Backup, HPE. So I already kind of mentioned this, but I wanted to reiterate. So everything we've been talking about is Zerto for virtual machines. This slide is Zerto for Kubernetes. I mentioned that. So everything that happens that Zerto can do for virtual machines, they can do in the Kubernetes or container space. So, make cloud mobile containers and move cloud containers into the cloud. Pardon me. Sorry about that. But yeah, so all that capability is in the Zerto for Kubernetes. And I think I mentioned the point, but I do want to reiterate if I didn't, is Zerto does not work on bare metal. So that's just one of the caveats for Zerto. So another integration point is Data Services Cloud Console. I mentioned that earlier. So this is an example of the platform. So at the bottom right, Cloud Infrastructure Services. This is the deploy, manage, upgrade, and optimize of your infrastructure, right? And then, so sitting on top of the infrastructure is data. So Cloud Data Services, you want to protect, mobilize, access, and search your data. So the 2 stars are where Zerto is going to plug into there. And so this is a look at that. So the infrastructure services on the bottom. On top of that, we need the infrastructure on the bottom. Then we need infrastructure services to run on top of that. So that's a fleet manager. You need security and audit, HCI manager, block manager, all those low-level services. And then finally on top of that is the cloud data services, like I've mentioned. And you can see backup and recovery, those green blocks. So backup and recovery has already launched. That product launched late last year. And then Zerto is going to come in. You can see the Zerto logos for disaster recovery and data migration. And that, like I said, that product will launch this year. So a little bit of on ROI. So this is an example of some of the benefits that Zerto has been seen realized at some companies, HCA Healthcare, like I said. What I wanted to point to is BJ. So they eliminated a secondary site and they saved $800,000 in 3 years doing their DR to a public cloud. So a lot of money you can save with Zerto running workloads to a public cloud like for DR. And then we're just going to wrap up here with this slide and one last one. So these are some of the core use cases enabled with Zerto. Fastest disaster recovery times we talked about, ransomware protection, and cloud native. It truly is a cloud native data protection platform. Disaster recovery as a service, we're going to deliver that as HPE. And lastly, application and data mobility. We talked a lot about seamless and hybrid and multi-cloud mobility with continuous replication across clouds. Really gives you that mobility. And then this was the one slide from the acquisition, and this is what I'm going to close with. HPE now delivers the most robust disaster recovery and data and application mobility as a service solution in the industry for any storage device, any app, any cloud, and any recovery SLA. So I think it was a very compelling statement, and that's what I'm going to wrap up with. And hey, we've got the ability, because Zerto is such a slick product, to show you Zerto in action. So we can actually show a failover because it only takes a minute or two. And now we're going to watch a video clip to do that.
So now we clicked start move. So what's going to happen is, we've got the move before commit. So what it's going to do is issue a shutdown command to these 4 virtual machines, right? Once those virtual, and we're still replicating that data across. So we see 9 seconds ago, I got a checkpoint. So we're about, 9 seconds behind right now. So now these virtual machines are powering off. We're going to insert a checkpoint from when these are off, right? So now we're at an off state. It's taking a point in time from when these are off. So there's no new data. You're going to get all that data. And now if you look at the other side, we've created those 4 virtual machines with the same settings that we have in production. VM version 7, 1 CPU, a quarter of a gig of RAM, right? These are just tiny VMs. But the idea is it doesn't matter if they're large or small VMs. All the data is already over there for the most part. All we're doing is these create virtual machine tasks. The Zerto virtual manager is talking to the vCenter to say, create these virtual machines with these settings. Then these move files, we have all the data attached as disks on the VRA. So we're moving them off those VRAs and attaching them to the respective VMs. And then we're creating scratch disks with pointers to whatever point in time in the journal. So it's going to be the latest point in the journal. And then we're just powering those on. So the first one just got powered on. Then we're going to wait, 2 seconds. Then we're going to start the next one. Then we're going to wait 3 seconds. And then we'll see 3 and 4 come up. So once 3 and 4 are powered on, Zerto considers its migration complete, right? So we go back in here and it's then going to show me, okay, now you've got 60 minutes to test that application. So in a real world, the application owners would be on hand. So you would say, hey, the migration's complete. These are all up at the other side. Can you guys log in? So it's going to boot, it'll do its regular, like it's from a powered off state. It's going to boot up, get networking, make sure that everything works. So the application owner goes in there and let's say 20 minutes later says, yeah, everything's good. Everybody can access it. And at this point, it's fully functional and it's on whatever network you want it to be on. So it's live right now. So this virtual machine is live. But if anything went wrong, like you set it up and say, I put this on the wrong network. You can go back into Zerto and say, I need to roll this back and make some changes to the VPG and then redo it. So if you go in and everything's good, all you're going to do is click commit, or you wait an hour and it's automatically going to commit that and start that reverse protection. So I'm just going to commit it so we can kind of speed up the process.
All right, so now you understand how simple Zerto works and how capable it is for failing over workloads to and from the cloud. And we'll wrap it up there and take some Q&A.
All right, great. Thanks, Ken. Really informative presentation. Appreciate the demo too. Are you ready for some questions?
Yes, sir. Fire away.
Excellent. And we do have the poll up here during the Q&A portion. So if you could just everybody fill in what additional information you'd like about the HPE solution, we would greatly appreciate it. So we did have quite a few questions come in from the audience. Jeffrey is asking, is there failback to prevent from having to restore everything?
Yeah, so that's the question is interesting. So I guess I will answer it best I know how. So first off, reverse protection is something that you would want to do most of the time. So if you're protecting, let's say from on-prem to the cloud, and you failed over to cloud or you moved it to the cloud for some reason, you'd usually want to set reverse protect back to your on-prem environment, or you can point protection to another AWS region, something like that. But the point is, I don't think you'd ever have to restore everything unless you lost an entire,
data center or workload running. So that reverse protect is key whenever you fail over or move a workload.
Okay, super. Question here from Steve. Does Zerto protect Office 365 and OneDrive data?
So another question, that context is a little, I'd need to clarify that, but I think I understand where he's going with that. So the first thing I would say is that there's no specific integration with Office 365 or OneDrive. There's no agents, anything like that. And so Zerto really just protects workloads. So anything running in VMs, and specifically groups of VMs that make up a workload. So if Office 365 and OneDrive are a workload that they're protecting as a group, we replicate, basically every bit, right? And so I'll expand upon that. So with databases, if you're doing database in memory, that's the one caveat where Zerto, if it's not written to disk, Zerto can't protect it. So with databases, you pretty much need to flush to disk to, fail a workload over with right order fidelity and that kind of thing. Okay.
All right. Super. There's a question here from Guy. It's a complicated question, but I'll just throw it at you. How seamless is a Zerto integration into a cloud data protection strategic plan?
Okay, so yeah, that is a complex question, but I think this, into a strategic plan is a little bit easier to answer. So into a strategic plan, quite easy, right? So it's understanding what cloud you want to go to and where, and then building Zerto into that is pretty simple. It's deploying, in your production data center or your on-prem, and then basically configuring that protection group to protect the workload and pointing it to that AWS instance. And then you replicate. You could pre-seed out in AWS, or you could just start the replication and eventually get to that near synchronous protection.
Okay.
So point is, yeah, I think it's very easy to build it into a plan. To execute it is a little bit more complex, but very easy still.
Great. And I think Ned is setting us up with a great closer question as we're coming up on time here, Ken. He's asking, how can one learn more about or get started with HPE in Zerto?
Yeah, great question. So you can go to the channel and talk to your reseller. You can go to hpe.com. And actually, the last slide in this deck that we've provided has the link to the Zerto page on hpe.com, as well as Zerto.com is still up and running. And importantly, there are tons of assets. So you can create a My Zerto account, and you can do courses. There are certifications if you really want to come up to speed on Zerto itself. Or, yeah, contact the HPE seller or reseller in your neck of the woods.
Fantastic. So a ton of resources still up on the Zerto page as well. That's great to hear. Okay. Well, Ken, thanks for the presentation today. That was great, and the demo, and for your answers here in the Q&A, and thanks for bringing us up to speed on HPE and what's going on with Zerto there.
You bet. Appreciate you having me.
Okay, and we are up to our final prize drawing of the day. And the winner of the last $500 gift card is Jai Chandarana from Michigan. And the winner of our final grand prize Google Pixel 6 Pro phone is Wayne Shi from California. So Jai and Wayne, congratulations. We'll be in touch about claiming your prizes. We'll be in touch with all the winners today. Congratulations to everyone who won one of the prizes. So if you enjoyed today's event and you got a lot out of it, you may benefit from our next EcoCast on the calendar on Thursday, February 3rd. It's about powering up your databases. And so we'll just be covering everything database. So if that's part of your portfolio, this could be a great event for you. Also want to mention that if you're watching the lineup of this event and you think that that your company's solution would actually be a great part of it in a future event, we'd love to hear from you. Just email us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. We'd be happy to share the schedule of future EcoCasts and Megacasts and discuss where your solution might be most appropriate. Also, just a shout out to our Guerrilla Guides, the technical resources that we publish. They're great books for getting up to speed on any technology. You can join the Guerrilla Guide book series and get in on those books. And finally, you can refer an IT friend or coworker to our online events, and you both could win a $300 Amazon gift card. So you can see the URL there. It's actualtechmedia.com/event-referral, and you can click on it from this link, and that's a great place to help your colleagues find out about our great events. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I do want to thank all of our presenters today for putting together such great presentations and demos, and all of their Q&A insights today on cloud-native data protection and disaster recovery options. Do want to thank all of our participants: Rubrik, Pure Storage, NetApp, Druva, Unitrends, Kasten by Veeam with Nutanix, and HPE. And finally, we'd like to thank all of you for attending today's Megacast and for all of your great questions. That concludes today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.